Truss vows to be a disruptor as she prepares to address a divided Conservative Party conference.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 5th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins. Here's what is making the news this morning.
The Prime Minister will use a speech today to defend her economic strategy, attacking what she calls an anti-growth coalition. It comes on the last day of a Conservative Party conference dominated by internal division.
Migrants crossing the Channel could face a ban on seeking asylum under new rules proposed by the Home Secretary. Speaking yesterday, Suella Braverman said her goal was to cut net migration by tens of thousands.
Ukrainian forces in the south of the country have made dramatic gains, pushing into areas around the occupied city of Kherson. Russia no longer has full control of any of the regions that it illegally annexed last week.
And later in the programme, we'll be getting an update from the one and only Eamonn Holmes. He'll be coming to us live from his home to tell us how he's getting on as he recovers from back surgery.
So if you would like to send any questions or good wishes to Eamonn, let us know. Or if you want to get involved in any of the conversations, as always, email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. Our top story then, the Prime Minister will use today's speech to defend her economic strategy, arguing that disruption is the price of success.
Well, at the end of a Conservative Party conference that has been dominated by internal division, she'll also attack what she calls an anti-growth coalition who oppose her plans. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, is at the conference and has this report.
Well, it's the final day of Conservative Party conference here in Birmingham, and it is the big day in the sense that we're going to hear from the Prime Minister, Liz Truss. She is going to address the Conservative Party conference a little later on this morning, her first time, of course, as the new Conservative leader. And much of the speech is, unsurprisingly, going to focus on the issue of the economy, about trying to return growth to the British economy, but also trying to, I think in many ways, explain why the government is taking some of the measures they are and what growth looks like to you, me and everyone else. The Prime Minister is going to apparently set out a vision to get Britain moving. She's going to say that her priority is for that growth to enable people to fulfil the hopes and dreams, and that she'll argue that the status quo is not an option given the challenges the country faces. Now, interestingly, she's going to talk about the size of those challenges, saying that they are immense. We've got war in Europe, an uncertain time after COVID, and a global economic crisis, and that's why she argues Britain needs to do things differently. In saying that, well, that speech is going on, and it'll be interesting to see how many people are in the hall, given the fact that many of them left yesterday, due to the rail strike today, is just the atmosphere at this conference. We've got cabinet ministers going rogue, going off message, whether it's on benefits, whether it is telling other Conservative politicians, frankly, to pipe down and stop criticising the government, as we heard from the Welsh Secretary yesterday about Michael Gove, or just the general mood amongst the members that are here. It's fascinating, almost a quiet sense of resignation that they feel that they are losing their grip on power, that the Conservatives almost certainly will lose the next election. Really is very odd. Some people equating to what it was like here at a Conservative Party conference in 1995 in the run-up to that landslide victory for Labour and Tony Blair. In saying that, the government feel that they are doing the right things, that these are the right measures, that they do have the time and will have the time to see a growth in the economy. But this is another big political test for Liz Truss. She's had a very turbulent, a very challenging start to her premiership. Unlike any other, this will be a key moment she needs to get right, not just for the Conservative membership in the hall, but also for the general population, for you and everyone else watching from home.
Well, joining us now for more is market analyst and the founder of Macrodesiac, David Bell. Good morning to you, David. Welcome back to the programme. Look, after the turmoil of the last sort of 10 days or so, do you see things settling down, not least in the wake of what the Chancellor said in the last couple of days and what we expect to hear from the Prime Minister promising disruption today?
Yeah, well, I think from a market context, the pound's back up at 1.14 versus the dollar, which is actually above where we started before Kwarteng introduced the mini-budget. The Bank of England really is the big player here in terms of settling the market. You know, they showed willing to step in to sort of calm the gilt market a lot, which obviously gave the pound a nice bid as well. I think, over the last couple of weeks, every time I've been on, I've mentioned this factor of the market where it comes down to certainty versus uncertainty. Now, the market at the moment probably doesn't perceive there to be as much as uncertainty as there was. I think the Tory party at the moment cannot get any worse in terms of optics and direction of their policy. So you can almost think of it as an elastic band. It's been stretched really, really far already, and now it's kind of reverted back. And I think that's probably the best analogy for it, especially if you do look at the pound and how it's behaved since the mini-budget.
Would you say the markets then are reassured?
Yes, because the second that the Bank of England or any central bank shows, the desire to step in to calm things, they're the buyer of last resort. Yeah. Institutional funds, banks, etc., they become more reassured that there is a buyer of last resort and they can function properly.
OK, so we're OK then, market-wise, at the moment by that assessment. But as we know, that move from the Bank of England was only to last for 2 weeks. We also had confusion from the Chancellor about when his fiscal plan was going to be unveiled. Would it move back to the end of November after the Monetary Policy Committee come out with their inflation agreement at the beginning of November? So there is uncertainty on the horizon. And as I say, mortgage rates also up still since that intervention from the Chancellor. So, do you predict that there will be more wobbles along the way?
In the rising rate environment and in the kind of macro context, so the broader global economic environment, there's definitely going to be wobbles. I mean, we're seeing it all over the place. Germany, just yesterday, for example, has been found to have basically hidden 360 billion euros worth of funds in special funds. So they're effectively in a massive deficit, and EU nations aren't going to like that. If we talk about mortgage rates, US mortgage rates are up at 6.8% as well. So in terms of mortgages specifically, I think there's been kind of a parallel made, and it is kind of a coincidence that it's come at this time.
Really? Do you really think that? I mean,
yeah.
The fact that all of those lenders withdrew their offers within 24 hours of that speech and the way it unfolded last week, you're saying that was not linked in any way to what the Chancellor was saying, just the same as what's happening in the States?
I think there was possibly some linkage to it. However, the broader picture is that interest rate expectations are higher. The last time I was on, I mentioned that the Bank of England were looking to hike by about 2%. That's what the market was pricing anyway, by the November meeting.
The chief economist at the Bank of England, Hugh Pill, saying last week the rise in borrowing is undoubtedly UK-specific component.
I just don't see that, though, genuinely, because the US mortgage rate is at the highest since 2007. So we have to really broaden. He may, perceive that as the case. But if we look globally, it's literally not the case at all. You can look at so many other countries where interest rates are rising and their mortgage rates are rising concurrently.
This is probably me not understanding the situation, which says a lot about me, but effectively, weren't the government's borrowing costs, didn't they rise because of the fall in the value of the pound, because of the way in which that mini-budget was presented? That's how I understand it.
So gilt yields rose pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Then the Bank of England came back to calm it down.
Yeah. But those borrowing costs, they hadn't... I mean, at one point, it was costing us more to borrow money than Italy or Greece.
Yes, it was slightly...
That was because of the mini-budget. Have I got that wrong?
Yields were slightly above Italian BTPs, yeah.
Yeah.
However, if you think, do we actually have a worse credit profile than Italy, Greece? No. No, we don't.
No, and this is about perception. Exactly. I get that. This is about the way information's presented. And with that in mind, do you think that they should get this fiscal medium plan out sooner rather than later?
In terms of the optics with what the Tory party and the economics behind it over the last couple of weeks, it is absolutely atrocious, quite frankly. The easiest thing they could have done was increase the personal allowance, and that would have resolved most of these issues. It comes down to optics with this. I think I said, again, a couple of weeks ago that if they'd have done this in 6 months' time rather than right now when they're literally fighting the Bank of England trying to prevent inflation, it would be a totally different context. So politically, it's just so stupid.
Well, do you have confidence in Liz Truss?
No, I don't have confidence in Liz Truss. But more
she can't win it back for you?
No, because it's political stupidity. It's like you lose distrust because they can't see the obvious mistakes or follies in what they've done. And they keep doing it. Suella Braverman coming out and saying about Rwanda. It's just stupid timing consistently. And anyone, you know, in markets can see that.
Do the markets, do they take account of cabinet unity? If members of the cabinet are publicly questioning the government's policy, do they price that in as well?
So we kind of look more at short, mid, long term. The fact that the Bank of England have stepped in is the overriding factor in this.
Yeah.
You know, we basically know that they're willing to, you know, put on pause their quantitative tightening programs, perhaps even dampen their interest rate hike expectations. And that is good for, you know, kind of calming that uncertainty. So that overrides everything. But of course, in the short term, things like cabinet disunity, things like, you know, poorly thought out economic policy, that absolutely causes volatility and disruption.
Yeah.
OK, David Bell, founder of Macrodesiac, thank you very much indeed for your
Thanks,
analysis
guys.
this morning.
Yeah, interesting. One of the latest Ipsos polls says fewer people think Truss is doing a good job as PM than thought Boris Johnson was doing a good job pre-resignation.
Oh dear, that's bad polling, isn't it? Well, look, after a party conference that's been overshadowed by division and the now infamous U-turns, do Conservative supporters miss Boris Johnson as Prime Minister?
Alice Porter is in Uxbridge and South Ruislip. That's Boris Johnson's constituency. Alice, morning to you. What have people been saying to you? Perhaps not right now, because it doesn't look very busy.
Good morning. Well, of course, this has been a very safe Tory seat ever since it was first created, and I have been here so many times over the last 6 months or so, getting people's reactions to different scandals that Boris Johnson has been involved in, with such as Partygate, and it's always really struck me that there is a huge degree of loyalty for Boris Johnson in his constituency. The question is, are people here just because they're voting Conservative? Are they going to be loyal to Liz Truss? Because between the two Prime Ministers, we're seeing different policies, and actually Liz Truss is rowing back on policies which Boris Johnson implemented, such as in the mini-budget we saw her rowing back on the increase to universal credit, which Boris Johnson had, of course, bought in. And yesterday at the Tory party conference, she didn't confirm whether benefits would rise in line with inflation. Well, that was something that Boris Johnson had confirmed to the public. So for Conservative voters, they may not feel the same way about Liz Truss as they did about Boris Johnson. I was out and about here speaking to people about the two Prime Ministers, and this is what they had to say.
I wish they hadn't pushed Boris out. I think he's hit the ground running from day one, and he hasn't really been given a chance to actually just be Prime Minister without all this Brexit and COVID and everything else in Ukraine. So I hope he gets a chance to have another go.
I think she's really reliant on her cabinet. I do miss, Boris Johnson. He had a lot more support behind him.
Don't basically miss Boris Johnson. I don't think Liz is doing a better job. Already, I think as soon as she came up, they're saying I think in billions we're in debt already. As soon as she came in, I think she's trying to help, but I don't think she's going to last for long.
Yeah, he did a few things wrong, and a lot of people but he did a lot of things right. And yes, I miss him a lot.
What do you dislike about what Liz Truss is doing at the moment?
I think she's for the rich and not for your middle class people.
He's been sacked from every job he's ever had for lying, and although I think that from an integrity perspective, Liz Truss probably isn't like that. I don't think she's the right person to lead the country.
Do you think Uxbridge and South Ruislip could vote Labour in the next election?
I think that there are very many places in the country, including here, that would absolutely have a bigger turnaround.
Well, there you go, some of the thoughts of people in Uxbridge. And it was interesting, that final woman's comment there about whether this seat, which has historically always voted Conservative, could change, because we've got 18 months until a general election, which actually isn't that long. And there's a big question about whether this seat and other seats as well, how safe they are, because in 2017, Boris Johnson only won here by a majority of just over 5,000, which was the smallest of any sitting Prime Minister since 1924. So with the general election only 18 months away and the cost of living crisis continuing to be a huge issue for so many people in the country, seats like this may not be so safe for the Conservatives.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's our reporter, Alex Porter, in Boris Johnson's constituency. Interesting what you had to say there about that majority may not be that safe.
Yeah.
So if they do want to get him back as party
They
leader...
might have to move him.
Yeah, well, what do you think? Is it time to... Do you want to go back to Boris Johnson? And what does the Conservative Party do from here?
Let us know your
GBviews
thoughts.
at gbnews.uk.
Right, the time is exactly 6:15. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning. In a GB News exclusive interview, Donald Trump has praised the Prime Minister for following a tax-cutting agenda. The former president also said King Charles has a great way about him, but thinks he has an agenda.
You know, he has a strong view on things. Probably difficult when you're the king. You want to have 100% of the people love you, like the Queen did. The Queen had everybody loved her, right? She didn't have that kind of an agenda, and yet, you know, she was a very strong woman. I got to know her too. She was a very strong woman, a great woman.
Passengers are set for more travel chaos today after yet another strike. Members of the union ASLEF and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the industrial action will continue until the government intervenes. We'll have more on that in the programme.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. He's also charged with making a threat to kill the Queen and having a loaded crossbow, an offensive weapon, in a public place. Now, there's been a new study into fussy eaters.
Right.
I know little people in particular are fussy eaters. A new study of 1,000 parents aged 5 to 11 revealed the top 30 foods that children don't like. What do you reckon are in the top 3? Because we've both got kids similar
Brussels
sort of age.
sprouts.
Yes.
Is that in the top 3?
Yes.
Is it number 1?
Yes.
Brussels sprouts is number 1.
Guess what else?
Well, but you know what? I think when it comes to Brussels sprouts, a lot of adults have issues with...
They might be hated, but children don't get served them that often. It's sort of a Christmas thing, really.
I do think when you serve Brussels sprouts, I know we're segueing into Christmas chat here. There are ways to kind of sex them up, if that's the right word.
Yes, with a bit of bacon and orange juice a la Nigella.
Exactly, yeah. Sexy sprouts.
Anything with bacon, my youngest is happy with. But what else? Well, you can see now, I don't want to spoil the fun, but you've got a whole list of things there.
Oh, cabbage, classic.
Cabbage is an absolute no-no. Onions, you see, my kids are fussy. Well, my youngest is the fussy eater. My eldest will eat anything, even cardboard if it got half the chance. Fish, avocado, cauliflower. So, are your children fussy eaters, and have you got any top tips on how you get them to eat them? I remember from my childhood, spinach was an absolute hate of mine. And God love my mum, she's just not the best cook. So when she made the spinach, it would be put onto a cold plate, and then she'd put some butter on it, which wouldn't melt because the spinach was already cold by the time it got to the table. So it was just cold spinach with a lump of unmelted butter on. What does make me... Whoa.
Still? Oh, right.
No, I love spinach now, but you want it sort of mixed in with other things.
It always goes back to our childhoods, doesn't it? GBviews at gbnews.uk on how you get kids to eat. Essentially, what it comes down to is if it's good for you, then they're not always going to like it.
Yeah, although my children pop cherry tomatoes as if they're sweeties.
That's good.
Which is good. So, that goes against the grain. Anyway, any unusual child favourite foods? What food did you hate or perhaps love unusually as a kid? Let us know this morning.
It is 6:18. Let's bring you the latest from Ukraine, whose President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced that his forces are making fast progress in liberating the country's Kherson, Kharkiv and Luhansk regions.
Well, this all comes as the UK's Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, reiterated Britain's commitment to supporting Ukraine at the Conservative Party conference yesterday.
I said that if Putin was foolish enough to attempt to invade Ukraine, the Ukrainians would defend their country ferociously. And they have done just that. Their bravery and passion have been amplified by the arms and the training that the UK has supplied. And we will support them until this war is won. We will support them until their territorial integrity is restored. And we will support them until the last Russian tank is dragged away by the last Ukrainian tractor.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly was speaking to him just before 9 o'clock this morning about Ukraine and what's going on at the Conservative Party conference. But joining us now is the Professor of International Politics at the University College Dublin, Scott Lucas. Scott, morning to you. Can you just put into context for us how significant these gains are by the Ukrainian army?
Vladimir Putin is losing. That's how significant this is. 7 months after the Russian invasion, what Ukraine has done in just a matter of weeks in the past month is they've regained much of the territory that Russia took during the invasion. That includes the northeast, the Kharkiv region. It includes part of what we call Donetsk and Luhansk, which is in the east. And the big breakthrough on Monday was an advance of about 20 miles against the Russians in the south and Kherson. Now, what that does, first of all, is it means that everything since February that Putin tried to accomplish is now being undone, compounded by problems within Russia that we can discuss. But secondly, Ukraine now is on the verge of being able to move into territory that the Russians have controlled since 2014 through their proxies. That includes what we call the Donbass region in the east, and it includes Crimea, this big peninsula that Putin just seized, that he just annexed, without really a fight back from anyone 8 years ago. So Putin, who made this big gamble, well, he gambled on 2 points. James Cleverly raised them. First, he said, you know, if I go in quickly, I can take Kiev, I can get rid of Vladimir Zelensky and his government, I can occupy within days, weeks. Failure. Secondly, I can split off Ukraine from the international community, isolate it. People won't risk the cost of supporting it politically, economically, militarily. Failure. Does he go for a third failure by annexing these territories and calling them Russian? Well, that's exactly what he did last Friday. And within days, that is coming undone.
Well, if there are two things I feel like we've learned about President Putin through all of this, the first is that you can't dismiss any sabre rattling, and we've had more very serious inflammatory sabre rattling in recent days. And the second is that when he's cornered, he's at his most dangerous. So if he's losing, I suppose the conclusion from all of this is we're in very dangerous territory, aren't we?
Well, I think you're leading me to the chatter that we've had, which is that the Russians have moved forces which are nuclear capable for exercises near the Ukrainian border. And we know that when Vladimir Putin threatens exercises, what he has done in the past, there was the invasion in February. But I do think this is a further line, which if Putin does it, he effectively is just burning down everything, including his own future. Because if Vladimir Putin dares to use even one tactical nuclear weapon on Ukraine, first, it won't change the outcome of the war. It just simply means that territory his forces are in right now becomes radiated. It won't stop the eventual, basically, advance against him. But two, who in the world is going to support the use of a nuclear weapon by Putin? China won't do it. India won't do it. Maybe North Korea. But North Korea is not exactly who you want to be relying on if you're going to be fighting this war in 2023. Putin's a dangerous man. You should always realize that he is capable of evil and capable of aggression. But at this point, I wouldn't go so far as what people are saying, which is he may be a madman. I still think the rational calculations means that it's very unlikely that Putin will use nuclear weapons.
We want to ask you about Elon Musk. He's been arguing with President Zelensky after saying Ukraine should stay neutral in the war with Russia to seek peace. What's all this involvement from Elon Musk?
His ego. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. First of all, Elon Musk wants to be in the news, always wants to be there. So he says, basically, I've got this plan to solve the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which effectively capitulates to Putin's demands. It means that some of these territories that we've talked about, where Ukraine is advancing, and territory like Crimea, these would be handed over to Russia just through the semblance of negotiations. There have been some very pointed responses from analysts and from Ukrainian officials, including one which is just a classic, which just tells, well, basically Musk in 7 letters what to do. But secondly, let me put this into a wider context. This is the same Elon Musk who 24 hours ago said, you know what? I'm going to buy Twitter again. What Elon Musk did several months ago to get attention is, I'm going to buy Twitter. I'm going to bid $44 billion for it. He then found he couldn't really get it that easily, so he had a pout, threatened legal action. Now Elon Musk wants a little bit of attention, so he goes, guess what? I'm going to buy Twitter once more. He's brilliant in what he does in building up certain companies, but he is also effectively a narcissist who likes to speak out on issues about which he has precious little knowledge.
To quote the great Bill Browder yesterday, he said, "Stay in your lane, Elon Musk." And look, we shouldn't forget he provided those Starlink satellites, didn't he, during the Mariupol siege? And that was hugely valuable to the Ukrainians. But President Zelensky firmly putting Elon Musk back in his box yesterday. Just one really quick word. I'm being told we need to wrap, but I want to talk to you about Alexei Navalny. He's repositioning himself, obviously the key opponent to Putin in Russia, as being the party anti-mobilization, and he's waking the sleeping majority of Russians. Could this be significant?
It's more importantly whether Russians themselves wake themselves up. The fact is, Navalny is contained, deeply contained, serving, a prison sentence of more than 10 years in very strict conditions. If Russians come out against this mobilization to the point where they challenge not only their defense ministry, which they are doing, but if they challenge Putin himself, then you get space to take on wider issues, which is we need to have an effective opposition in Russia that represents us, and that includes Alexei Navalny. But the Russian people have to move first before Navalny can.
Scott Lucas from University College Dublin, thank you for speaking to us this morning. It is 6:26. After the break, we'll find out how a local council in Northern Ireland is using a plan first developed in the pandemic to tackle the cost of living.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 6:28. Still to come on today's programme. Just before 7 o'clock, Showbiz reporter Kinsey Schofield will be live from LA to update us on all the latest drama surrounding Meghan and Harry's Netflix series.
They're said to be panicked. All the details coming up on that. Plus, we'll have a list for you of the country's most popular baby names. It's going to be released later today. Paul and Isabel, will they make the cut?
Yeah, will Mohammed be number one again?
Probably. That's at 7:45. We'll be speaking to a baby name expert and find out what surprising choices she expects to see. And I just wanted to read some of your views out whilst we've got it. We were talking about fussy children and food. Steve has very helpfully sent some top tips. He said, if you want your kids to eat some spinach, add it to very finely sliced cabbage. Cook your cabbage in around 1 centimetre of water with a knob of butter. Lid on. Turn it every couple of minutes. Takes about 12 minutes to cook. Drain what little water there is. Add spinach and stir.
I'm loving the level of detail in that, Steve. Kate in Margate says, morning to you, Kate. I would tell her that Brussels, my daughter that is, Brussels were baby cabbages and broccoli were mini trees. To this stage, she will ask for mini trees and she is now a teenager.
Yeah, so let us know.
At gbnews.uk on that one. Also, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about the Conservative Party conference as well this morning, so get in touch with us about that.
So we need a little pause now. Coffee for one, ASAP.
Yeah. Someone said, pause for the sting. There it was. That was what they call a sting. It is 6:30. Should we go to Northern Ireland?
Let's do that, yes, because some councils there are fighting the soaring inflation with policies used first during the pandemic.
In towns that depend on seasonal income, local government is trying to be more inventive to stop costs rebounding onto domestic rates. Our reporter Dougie Beattie has more.
The North Antrim coastline is both rugged and beautiful, and storms can appear in an instant. The council here are moving to stay ahead of the financial one that may be heading their way. Causeway Coast and Glens hosts many of Northern Ireland's top tourist destinations. The income that supplies is very seasonal, and the jobs that it creates are lowly paid. The lack of big corporate business here means that the domestic rate is heavily relied on. Ivor Wallace explains how a COVID strategy is the foundation for a policy that may keep the cost of local government down while getting help to where it is needed most.
The positive of COVID was that it forced us, maybe the wrong word, us to do a strategy where we have brought all the different organisations together. And we're all be able to work together then, so food banks, social supermarkets, all these community groups that were out there already doing a great job, and they were all going their own ways, whereas we were able to bring them all together, give everybody a wee bit of direction, them come back to us and tell us what they needed.
Ricky Wright chairs the poverty group and has seen a different demographic using charities.
We're definitely seeing a rise in people who normally were able to easily afford the basics, but also afford holidays or other things in a middle class way that have had to really cut back on those costs. So I think everyone's in the same storm, where the rising cost of living is impacting everyone, but maybe not everyone's in the same boat. There's some people who are operating on very marginal disposable income, and they're definitely being hit the hardest, but definitely people on the middle class are still being hit hard in terms of having to cut back on certain costs, and may find themselves in a place where they just can't afford to pay some of the outgoings that they've committed to.
Head of Council Services Julie Welch is aware that the priority of budgets may change for now, but sees the importance of future relations with all the current stakeholders.
We've had to think differently about prioritising what are the most immediate needs, but also thinking longer term in terms of how do we grow that infrastructure again. We need to deal with the crisis now, but we also need to look at the medium and longer term prospects for council and at the local council area, and that's why that framework in terms of the anti-poverty plan I think is so important in terms of how it even feeds into other local and regional strategies.
All around Britain, towns like this survive on the revenue from those that visit and holiday there. But with the middle classes now feeling the financial squeeze, how much priority will be given to leisure activities and the rewards that they bring? Dougie Beattie, GB News.
It does look beautiful. I've never been. I know you've been. You did a documentary for us, but I've never been to Northern Ireland. And every time Dougie does those beautiful reports with all his drone shots, it does make me think I ought to go and spend my pound over there.
Yeah, great country, great people, Northern Ireland. It is 6:34. After a short break, we're going to be joined by the newspaper review team of Mellor and Muldoon. That's how we're selling it. David Mellor and Claire Muldoon are going to go through this morning's papers, and they might have a thing or two to say, I'm guessing, about the Conservative Party conference.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It is 6:36. We were just hotly discussing with our newspaper panel there supermarket roast potatoes, as we do during the advert breaks. Apparently, David Mellor is a big fan of them.
I am.
Quite surprised by that.
I pop them in the oven and feel hugely triumphant when they come out crispy.
Oh, there you go.
Aunt Bessie's is the one.
That's what you've nicked my line again.
I can't believe this supermarket potatoes. I don't know what happened to just normal potatoes.
Yeah, just peel them yourself.
Yeah, but
peel and fluff them.
Who needs the effort?
Semi-parboil.
And do you know what?
Unbelievable.
I buy supermarket mashed potatoes.
Oh,
I mean, I add little bits of extra stuff.
Yeah.
Cheese and things like that.
You can get supermarket cheesy mash. Just saying.
Well, I can add the cheese.
Oh, right. Well, I wasn't
have
sure what the extent of your culinary interest was. Anyway, we digress.
Anyway, that is our top story this morning, roast potatoes.
David Mellor, Claire Muldoon, as you may have gathered, here to review the papers. And David, let's dive straight in, shall we? I mean, so much to cover here. It's been a dire conference, whether you are a die-hard Liz Truss fan or not. What are the Times saying on page 5?
They say that Tory MPs aren't happy. They say the attacks have been unrelenting, and they really have. And the scale of voters' discontent, says the Times, was underlined last week by a word cloud showing that incompetent was the most commonly chosen adjective for Truss, followed by useless, untrustworthy and dangerous. I mean,
is that
what
just
a life.
from the party?
You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. And then The Guardian, you wouldn't expect The Guardian to let up. They're on page 1 talking about Suella Braverman, who in some ways is a sort of strong and determined person. I rather warm to her, and hopefully she'll have a successful time as Home Secretary. But talking about a coup, which is not South America, but it's this exaggerated language, and it's this total loss of discipline within the Conservative Party that is particularly brought out in the Telegraph. Because, as you know, one of the things I enjoy when we do the papers is not to have the news endlessly repeated that you heard 3 hours ago on the television, or maybe more.
It's the comment you like,
It's
the
comment.
analysis.
And Philip Johnson says, there comes a time when governments simply run out of steam, and there is a strong sense in Birmingham that the Conservatives are approaching that moment or even beyond it. Historically, he says, there seems to be a finite term for governments, around 13 to 14 years. Well,
did they have any steam to start with? They've only just... They've not been in power. what, 3 weeks?
Oh, no, but we're talking about the
Conservative
Conservatives.
Party.
The Conservative Party,
Yeah.
right, not this.
I mean, I would argue
not
that
this particular one. But what this proves, and I'll shut up. But what this proves is that in trying to make Truss a credible Prime Minister, the Tories forgot one thing. When it came to the start of this process, only 50 Conservative MPs had her as their first choice. And now they're trying to make out that, you know, she's the new Margaret Thatcher. It isn't going to work, boys and girls.
I saw lots of discussion on social media, actually, with some support from Tobias Ellwood and ex-party member Rory Stewart for a complete overhaul to the way things are decided when it comes to new party leaders, not least because there are whiffs and discussions about whether or not she'll survive. Grant Shapps saying she's got 10 days left to prove her premiership. I mean, is there an appetite to change that in the light of the fact that it was this tiny percentage of the British population that, you know, chose this leader? And
I would
argue,
I would actually argue it could go further because people are actually pushing forward different ways that we vote. You know, instead of first past the post, that perhaps it should be proportional representation.
That's what Labour were trying to suggest last week.
You know, so you've got many different facets, many different layers of choosing the leader who is ultimately the Prime Minister. So a lot of people would be thinking, well, I didn't vote for her, but you voted for the party. That's the thing. That's why the Conservatives are in power. And I think the last thing the country actually needs and wants would be another general election. We're too unstable politically, financially, even geographically in terms of geopolitics, I would say we're far too unstable. We need to just...
Can she claw it back?
I don't know. I really don't know. I wake up and if this wasn't my job, I think I wouldn't even read any newspapers. I'm just so over it at the moment.
Yeah.
It's just constant.
Because if she can't claw it back, David, we're in a constitutional crisis, aren't we? She can't get stuff through Parliament. The party doesn't want a junker.
Well, there would have to be a general election.
Yeah.
And this is what I think one or two of these Conservative members of Parliament need to remember. You know, but look, none of this is new. I mean, sometimes things happen and you think, God, why did I say that last summer? What a fool I am. But just occasionally, Mystic Mellor lives up to his reputation for mysticity. And Mystic Mellor was saying throughout the summer that this Tory leadership election was a self-indulgent piece of nonsense. First of all, cutting out members of Parliament, which means Truss is cut no slack by most Tory MPs, but also spending all those weeks talking to a lot of, you know, lovely old geriatrics out in the sticks. And they end up with Liz Truss. And people were absolutely sick of that leadership election, including those participating in it. So if Liz Truss is not the biz, and Mystic Mellor thinks Liz Truss is not the biz, what are they going to do? They can't go and do this again, can they? I mean, there will then be the coup that Suella Braverman is
Well, they can do it,
for.
but will they? That's the question.
Well, yeah, and we will move on just a moment. Just David, I was just wondering, is this as bad as the John Major years in terms of the cabinet openly criticising?
Much worse.
This is worse than the John Major years.
Yes, I mean, in the John Major years, there were a few of what John called the B.DS.
Yes,
I'm trying to behave myself. But he would call.
Sorry, I'm having to work that out.
And basically,
I'll write it down for you.
And basically, there were 3 or 4 people who were always making a nuisance of themselves with him. But most of the cabinet stuff, again, it's also a sad thing for John Major is all this stuff about the exchange rate mechanism that really blighted his government after he'd unexpectedly won in 1992. Then it settled down to a good period. Ken Clarke was Chancellor. The economy performed well, but the public wouldn't forgive him for what happened at the beginning. And I think the public is not going to forgive Liz Truss. She could be Prime Minister till hell freezes over, but you've only got one chance to make a first impression, and her first impression is done.
But my question is whether or not this is a symptom of them being in power for 12 years or just a symptom of the actions that she's taken. Because, I mean, if Rishi Sunak had won that leadership contest, none of this would have happened because he was quite clearly opposed to every single measure that she announced or her Chancellor did in the mini-budget. And so would there have been this crisis, this constitutional crisis that we're in? And I just would put the case it's not to do with the length of time they've been in administration.
What it, again, had to do with was something we discussed at the time it happened. She wins. She goes off the platform. She totally ignores Sunak, an act of gratuitous rudeness. And then she sacks perfectly competent ministers because they didn't support her. Who is one of the people causing her most trouble after Michael Gove?
Grant Shapps.
Grant Shapps.
Yeah.
Grant Shapps was told, oh, well, he wasn't going to stay, not because he was a useless minister, and I've had my various opinions of Grant Shapps down the day.
He was pretty useless as transport.
We're talking about levels of uselessness, okay? He's at a higher level of, better level of uselessness than most of them. But the reality is, he is then got rid of, and what a surprise, he's out there causing trouble for her. What did she expect?
Well, they're behaving like a bunch of children. They really, really are. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Well, let us know at home how you feel, if you are depressed, disillusioned, frustrated,
politically homeless.
Exactly, politically homeless, or, you think that this is all mainstream media, which a lot of people lay the blame at the door of. Claire, let's talk about poor old Therese Coffey. Seems like the audience needs some coffee when she's speaking at conference.
I like Theresa Coffey, I really do. I think she's, she's...
Wake up and smell the coffee.
Well, that's it.
Let's see the Metro headline if we can, because
it was brilliant.
They had some fun with it.
And they had fun with the article. They speak about she might have failed to deliver the rush she might have hoped for. They talk about whilst the minister was full of beans, her audience looked distinctly uncaffeinated. Cameras caught at least 3 delegates in the hall snoozing, and a couple looked more on the verge. But back to the actual article. So what
Do you know why, though? Just as an inside scoop, it was the GB News party the night before.
It was, yeah.
Seriously?
It could have been.
We weren't invited.
I wasn't invited to, but the guys that were up in Birmingham were invited. Lots of people. So the word on the street is there were a few sore delegates.
Well, it might then go back to the fact that she's introduced an acronym of ABCD, and that's her plan for the NHS, meaning addressing issues with ambulances, backlogs, care, doctors and dentists. So I think she's on it. I think she's clearly a clever woman, and she's been very much working in the back of government, helping different departments. And now she's been given the Department of Health. She wants to, instead of having an oasis of dentists, instead of having a desert of dentists, she wants an oasis of dentists. And we all know, we've all spoken at great length of the issues surrounding the NHS at the moment, not being able to see GPs, not being able to get dental appointments for children, parents, NHS, private. All the changes of contracts have now come out post-pandemic to create this chaos in the system. And we're now got more cases of driving cases of COVID coming up now. We're again being told to protect the NHS. The NHS has to protect itself. Maybe it has to have a booster jab of something in terms of a clear out of middle management, of better pathways for patients to use the service. Because let's face it, the service is not free. Everyone keeps saying the NHS is free. It's not. We pay for it through our national insurance contributions. We need to remember that. It's our service.
And before we leave politics, one thing I forgot to mention from Philip Johnson's piece. You'd think with a new Prime Minister, all of the Conservative members of Parliament would be up there in Birmingham getting behind her. Most Conservative members of Parliament have not appeared in Birmingham, which shows a party that really has lost the will to be a credible party of government. And that, I think, what Philip Johnson says today, that is the message that I take away after, 50 years of wasting my life. I want another life, God. Wasting my life on politics.
Yeah.
It ends up like this.
General election soon, then, you think?
Well, I mean, they would be mad to have a general election, but madness appears to be quite a common disease in certain parts.
Well, yeah.
Because they can't win under these circumstances.
The other critical thing about this is the fact that there are more SNP voters now because of the state of Westminster, because a lot of Scottish people don't like conservatism at all.
Yeah.
And whilst there is no credible opposition, I would say, from Labour at least, where are the Lib Dems? Mark Drakeford in Wales has said nothing. Everyone just seems to be so apathetic, apart from wee Nicola, who still wants to drive through her pretendy ref, who was booed coming out when she was meeting King Charles in Dunfermline. Where was the reporting in that?
Yeah.
And yet the mainstream media were so against Boris Johnson. Did you hear the booze? Did you hear the booze? Did you catch the booze? When they weren't, it was more jostling. She definitely was, and it wasn't covered.
And speaking of Nicola Sturgeon, there's that 2-day hearing at the Supreme Court next week.
Yes, I know.
F2, which we'll be covering here on GB News. Thanks, guys. We'll have more from you in the next hour. It is 6:49. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening this morning.
Train passengers are set for more travel chaos today as yet another strike starts. Members of the union ASLEF and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chail will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act.
Elon Musk has offered to buy Twitter for a second time. The social media giant confirmed its plan to accept a deal worth £38.3 billion. The SpaceX founder originally pulled out of the purchase in July, citing the number of fake or spam accounts on the platform.
It is 10 to 7. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are resuming their normal lives back in the US with the return of Meghan Markle's Archetypes podcast yesterday and potentially a change of scenery on the horizon.
But insiders have also said the royal couple might be jeopardising their docu-series with Netflix after they reportedly requested significant edits. Well, here to tell us more about all of the above is Kinsey Schofield, live for us from LA. Good morning, or I should say good evening to you, where you are, Kinsey. Look, let's start, shall we, with Netflix, because we heard this about the book that Prince Harry was due to publish this autumn, immediately in the aftermath of their return after the death of the Queen. And now it appears as though they're sufficiently panicked by what they are doing to try and row back a little bit. But will they be allowed to?
Well, I want to read you word for word what page 6 their sources are saying, because I'm fascinated by this text. It says they've made significant requests to walk back content they themselves have provided, to the extent that some Netflix staff believe, if granted, it will effectively shelve the project indefinitely. They want to tone down even the most basic language, but it's their story from their own mouths. Now, Isabel, I feel like this is a constant conversation that we have. When are these people ever happy? It feels like they're not satisfied no matter what, whether it's their house, whether it's their documentary, whether it's their book. So that is what we're hearing right now, that there is panic amongst Netflix and the Sussexes. Now, the Sussexes team, their Archwell production company, they say this is ready to go. This is good to go. It's Harry and Meghan that don't want it to be released in November, along with The Crown. And Netflix is siding with Archwell, the production company that Harry and Meghan have. And it's really Harry and Meghan against their production company and Netflix at this point. So only time will tell whether or not this documentary is released. Meghan told The Cut this is their love story. So only time will tell if it's released or not. But Netflix is really adamant that it is released along with The Crown on November 9th.
My question is why? Why are they panicked? What's changed, do we think?
Well, you know, when it says tone down even the most basic language, to me, they said things in the heat of the moment. They explained their situation, and they realized that they might offend people, or that they might have been hurtful with their words. I mean, that's how I interpret that language. I could be wrong, but it just seems like they were probably... Every time they talk about how they're finally able to speak. This is finally you getting to know the real me. So I think that they thought maybe they had more control than they originally had planned, had no idea that the Queen was going to pass and that, Harry's father was going to be king. And they might have gotten a little arrogant and cocky.
The Archetypes podcast that has come out, who has Meghan been speaking to? What's she been saying? And, is she measuring her words a bit more carefully there?
Well, we did not have any drops that could be related to the royal family in Tuesday's drop with Lisa Ling and Margaret Cho. It was about Asians, their stereotypes in film. She specifically talked about Austin Powers and Kill Bill. it was an interesting conversation. I think Lisa Ling is an amazing woman, and Margaret Cho is, I'm sure you're familiar with her comedy, but both great women, a good gets. And the Asian community is certainly appreciative of Meghan shining the spotlight on it. Are they a little disappointed that she had to go into their tasty noodles? Yes, they did. They felt like perhaps that within itself was a stereotype, but I think that everybody understands hopefully where her heart was with this specific episode.
Good to hear.
And just finally, before we let you go, Kinsey, they're moving house, apparently.
I mean, Paul, are you kidding me? This is Montecito, California. They are saying that the current house they have is currently not accommodating, so they're looking at Hope Ranch. Now, the Housing Association has had so many complaints about the couple wanting to move to the Hope Ranch area. Residents not necessarily, they don't have any issue with Harry and Meghan. It's just a very secluded, very private, and they don't want the traffic. So the Housing Association, the HOA in Hope Ranch, saying, maybe could you not? Could you look anywhere else in Santa Barbara?
I suppose they're a bit of a draw, aren't they? I had a friend who just came back from a trip to Montecito, and he was explaining to me that they turn the street lights off at 10 p.m. because people just like, sustainable environment, and they love it to be quiet and peaceful. I thought it sounded absolutely gorgeous, and you've got the mountains, and you've got the bougainvillea and the vineyards nearby. How can you improve on Montecito? Sounds like heaven to me.
Come on over, Isabel. You've always got I've always got space on my couch for you. I'm outside of Montecito, but there's space for you.
I'll be there. Next flight. Thank you, Kinsey.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Right, stay with us. We'll be discussing more about all the politics of the day. Liz Truss, of course, the Prime Minister, taking to the stand at conference later with her big word of the day.
What is it?
Disruption.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A windy Wednesday and a wet start for many. Pretty mild out there this morning as well. Later on, we should see some brighter skies developing. But generally, it's a wet and windy start from this area of low pressure. It's been intensifying overnight, now crossing away from Scotland up towards the northern parts of the North Sea. But it's left behind a lot of wet weather this morning, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads, parts of the M6, the M8 in particular, but that rain is slipping south down across the Midlands now. After a dry start across eastern England, the rain will push in across Lincolnshire by lunchtime and then towards East Anglia and the southeast this afternoon. It will be clearing away from the south and from the northeast. Sunshine will follow, along with a whole raft of showers. It is blustery. It's quite mild out there this morning. Temperatures actually likely to be a bit lower this afternoon compared to this morning, generally in the mid-teens for England and Wales. 11 or 12 across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it'll feel colder because of the wind. A very blustery day then, staying pretty gusty overnight tonight. That rain will clear by late afternoon across East Anglia and the southeast, and then clear spells for most of England and Wales, but a lot of showers will keep coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will be a cooler night, certainly across the south. Temperatures down into single figures, staying at 9 or 10 across towns and cities further north, where there will still be a pretty strong wind blowing. A blustery day then on Thursday, not as windy as today, but some good spells of sunshine to come tomorrow for most of southern England, the Midlands, eastern England and much of eastern Scotland. The day's going to be dry and bright, but further west there will be a lot of showers coming in, parts of Wales, especially Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Still breezy, as I said, so again feeling cooler than these temperatures would suggest, but generally a little bit milder on Thursday compared to today, and staying gusty with further wet weather slipping south on Friday.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss hits back at party rebels as she prepares to address the conference.
Good morning, it's 7:01 on Wednesday the 5th of October. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Our top story this morning then, the Prime Minister Liz Truss will use a speech today to defend her economic strategy, attacking what she calls an anti-growth coalition. It comes on the last day of a Conservative Party conference dominated by internal divisions.
Migrants crossing the Channel could face a ban on seeking asylum under new rules being proposed by the Home Secretary. Speaking yesterday, Suella Braverman said her goal was to cut net migration by tens of thousands.
Ukrainian forces in the south of the country have made dramatic gains, pushing into areas around the occupied city of Kherson. Russia no longer has full control of any of the regions it illegally annexed last week.
And later in the programme, we'll be getting an update from the one and only Eamonn Holmes. He'll be coming to us live to tell us how he's getting on post-op. He had back surgery last week.
Debs has got in touch with us this morning. She says, where is all this negativity coming from against Liz Truss and the Conservatives? Quite a lot of us think they're doing a good job.
Keep your thoughts coming in. We want you to be part of the conversation. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
But our top story this morning, the Prime Minister's speech later today to defend her economic strategy, arguing that disruption is the price of success.
Well, at the end of a Conservative Party conference that's been dominated by internal division, she'll also attack what she calls an anti-growth coalition who oppose her plans.
The PM, speaking to our political editor Darren McCaffrey, insisted that her plan will help boost the economy.
What I want to see is a faster growing private sector, because I want to see investment and enterprise across our country. I want to see high wage jobs for people. I want to see more opportunity, and also I want to see more revenue generated for taxes to spend on our public services. So that's all about having successful businesses, making it easier to start up your own business and making it easier to get onto the jobs ladder and get a high wage job. That's what I'm about.
Well, that's what she's about. But will it wash with the party in disarray? Let's speak to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, joins us from Birmingham this morning. A lot riding on this speech today. We're told it's going to be shorter and perhaps more personal than previous Prime Minister speeches at equivalent conferences.
Yes, there's a lot riding on this speech today. Obviously, this has not been the conference that has gone particularly according to plan. Of course, off the back of Sunday evening, there was a massive U-turn from this Prime Minister, a Prime Minister who said when she got into the role that she was willing to be unpopular, but of course faced the tricky reality of parliamentary arithmetic. This speech today at about 10:30 will be the opportunity of the Prime Minister to get back on track, to get this party back on her side, to demonstrate that she is in this for the long haul, to say that she is sticking with the things that she says she will do. Because ultimately there is a question here over the authority of the Prime Minister. There is a worry amongst the allies of the Prime Minister that she may well have lost some authority. Now is the opportunity for her to prove them wrong. Now is the opportunity for the Prime Minister to assert her authority and indeed to try and carry forward a positive message, a message of unifying hope for the party. But there are several challenges here, of course. We know that there are several people who perhaps are not the best pleased with this Prime Minister. We know that there are several people who used to be in Cabinet who are now sitting on the back benches, not perhaps twiddling their thumbs, but thinking of ways to cause mischief. We know that this is a majority of 70 MPs that feels in some ways like a hung parliament for this Prime Minister, simply because of the arithmetic of the numbers of people who feel more independent now than they have felt before. But we also know that this is going to be a peculiar conference speech simply due to arithmetic. I'm not talking about parliamentary arithmetic here. I'm now talking about the numbers of people potentially in the hall. I was spending time in Liverpool last week for the Labour Party conference, and I have to say there were 2 queues to hear Sir Keir Starmer, 1 queue and then a queue for the queue. It was a very busy and indeed well-packed speech. It might be slightly different here at the Conservative Party conference, not because the party faithful here don't necessarily want to listen to their Prime Minister, to their party leader, to Liz Truss, but because of a man called Mick Lynch. Indeed, there is a rail strike on today. A number of Conservative members of Parliament, quite a great deal of Conservative activists and indeed a lot of logistics people as well, to the tune of not enabling the number of events that we would normally expect on the last night of Conservative Party conference to go ahead. There were several that were cancelled last night, and indeed it may well be a little bit more sparse of a Conservative Party leader speech. Liz Truss may well be speaking to not quite the full rafters that we would ordinarily expect, because a great deal of delegates left last night to try and avoid this train strike set on today.
Well, the good news is, Tom, they can watch that in full on GB News, so they don't need to be there in person. That's at 11:05, I believe. Tom, thank you with that from Birmingham.
Yeah, lots of you getting in touch with us this morning, by the way. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Robert says if they don't unite, they will lose their seats. Surely self-preservation should kick in. Nancy says, very disappointed with the Tory party who are acting like children. Writer and broadcaster Emma Webb joins us in the studio. Emma, are they onto something there, or where do you stand on this?
I think the outlook is, to be honest, very bleak. As Tom was saying there, you know, a number of MPs are going to be going home today, even before Liz Truss speaks. Liz Truss is trying to put forward, and we've already had word of some of the content of the speech. She's going to be putting forward her political philosophy, trying to basically lay out her wares and defend the moves that she's already made in front of the Conservative Party members, but also in front of the nation. And she wants to put forward forward this really optimistic vision about a more productive Britain. And I think actually that her ideas do hold a lot of weight economically. But the problem is whether or not, people say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. I don't know whether there is going to be any eating of these ideas, whether they'll have an opportunity to be tested. And we're already seeing so many people in the party, particularly certain MPs, turning their backs on her, MPs who simply haven't shown up to the conference, Rishi Sunak, some of Rishi Sunak's supporters, some MPs who still want Boris Johnson to be in charge of the show.
And members of the cabinet.
Well, that's
openly criticising her policy.
I'll just run through the list. Suella Braverman suggesting critics like Gove have staged a coup. Simon Clarke agreeing with the Attorney General. Kemi Badenoch then criticising them for inflammatory language. All cabinet members. Then you've got Penny Mordaunt appearing to make fiscal policy up on the hoof during an interview, making a view on budget, on benefit rises, which haven't yet been agreed. Robert Buckland agreeing with her. Lord Frost agreeing with them. Damien Green saying people calm down. I mean, collective responsibility. What's happened to the cabinet? Where's the discipline?
It really is quite extraordinary, especially having Penny Mordaunt coming out and basically laying out her own policy ideas as if she were leader, which does suggest that she wants to be at the forefront of a kind of a revolt, of a coup. Grant Shapps also coming out and criticising Liz Truss's policies. Basically, the government has lost control of the cabinet, and it doesn't look good. The optics of everything that has happened over the last week with the announcements of tax cuts and the way that the markets basically fell apart into chaos, though those have now recovered, it suggests that, Kwasi Kwarteng, and I think there's some fairness in him saying that basically the government had 4 days because of the mourning period to get themselves together before this announcement.
So
but frankly,
I just want to reference this, and it's one of the headlines in the Star, and we didn't get to it in the pay-per-view. Perhaps we will in the next one. This was the suggestion yesterday from the Chancellor.
Kwasi, it's all the Queen's fault.
It's all the Queen's fault, which obviously, they were saying that they were under a huge amount of pressure in the wake of the death of the Queen to come up with their plans. That's a terrible move from him. And then yesterday on GB News with our economics editor, Liam Halligan, we'll play the clip in a second, but basically appearing to say they're not bringing forward their fiscal plan to the end of this month, and it will stay on. Let's have a listen to that clip so we can show it properly.
You are going to bring forward the fiscal assessment in conjunction with the Office of Budget Responsibility. You said in your speech yesterday that will happen shortly. Is shortly before the 23rd?
So shortly is the 23rd. I mean, people reading the runes and parsing.
So it is going to be the 23rd November. You're not bringing that fiscal plan forward.
It's going to be the 23rd of November. Okay.
Emma, it was the 23rd. Then there were briefings. It was going to be shortly. Then he says it is the 23rd. But then we're hearing that actually it in stone is still the 23rd because they haven't got a new date.
It's so disorganised. And actually, when we're talking about the markets as well, trust is really important. It's trust is important politically and it's important economically. And by not communicating clearly, that is being completely fudged. And I think, actually, Liz Truss modelling herself after Margaret Thatcher, saying the lady is not for turning, and she's been criticised, obviously, for then doing a U-turn. Now, I don't think that U-turns in politics are always a bad thing. I think it's important if you think you're on the wrong road to go back and take the right one. But I think just in terms of optics, Liz Truss has been very adamant, and as has Kwasi Kwarteng, that they don't mind being unpopular, that they know what is best for the country, and they're going to go ahead with that, even if it doesn't play well. But the issue is that ultimately, she's still the head of a party. She still needs to have political consensus. She needs to have the country and the parliamentary party behind her. And if she can't pull them together, then, as Tom was saying, it's not dissimilar from being in a situation like with a hung parliament. We've got a 70-seat majority, and yet nothing is going through efficiently. So I think, Liz Truss really needs to, even if she does think she's the heir of Thatcher and the lady is not for turning, she needs to really knuckle down on the political communication side of things, because that's really important. I think the communication with the cabinet has been bad, the communication with the party has been bad, and the communication with the public has been bad. So this speech gives her a real opportunity to try and clear some things up, but there's only so much that a speech can do.
Emma, thank you for speaking to us. Really appreciate it. The thoughts of writer and broadcaster Emma Webb there. We will be speaking to the Foreign Secretary, by the way, James Cleverly, just before 9 o'clock, and we'll have lots to ask him about what is happening at the Conservative Party conference today, most notably, of course, Liz Truss's speech.
Yeah, well, we'll also be hearing from him on the situation in Ukraine, with the President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday announcing that his armed forces are making fast and powerful progress in liberating the country's Kherson, Kharkiv and Luhansk regions.
Yeah, this comes as the Foreign Secretary reiterated Britain's commitment to supporting Ukraine at the conference.
I said that if Putin was foolish enough to attempt to invade Ukraine, the Ukrainians would defend their country ferociously. And they have done just that. Their bravery and passion have been amplified by the arms and the training that the UK has supplied. And we will support them until this war is won. We will support them until their territorial integrity is restored. And we will support them until the last Russian tank is dragged away by the last Ukrainian tractor.
Well, joining us now from the conference is Ukrainian Member of Parliament Alexei Goncharenko to tell us his reaction to that reaffirmation of support. Good morning to you. A wonderful visual image from the Foreign Secretary there, imagining that last Russian tank being dragged away by Ukrainian tractor, and British presence very much there until the end.
Absolutely, and also another possibility is when the last Russian tank will be destroyed by British law. It also works for us. So we are very thankful for all support we are receiving from the United Kingdom. And I met personally with Foreign Secretary Cleverly yesterday, met with Liz Truss, and I can tell you that I'm sure that this support will continue, because the United Kingdom and the government of the United Kingdom understands that we are fighting not only for ourselves but for the whole free world. And in order to restore international law, we need to win this war as soon as possible.
Well, the worry is that Vladimir Putin may use tactical nuclear weapons. How do you feel about that?
That is very serious concern, and that is one of the topics why I'm here now in the UK, being on the Conservative conference, because I feel that it is still very unlikely, but the chances of this are rising, unfortunately, because on every possible crossroad, Putin chooses the worst possible track. And if he will continue to do this, we are moving to the possibility that he could be so desperate that he can realistically consider this option. And that's why we need to act now to prevent it. That's what I told to the United Kingdom, to the government, because of the UK, because the UK, the United States and France are three nuclear powers in the free world. And also in 1994, when Ukraine voluntarily gave up the third biggest in the world nuclear arsenal, it was made under the guarantees of the United States and the United Kingdom. And it is so important for us today to prevent this disaster. Also, it is important because if even any step to this in this direction will be made, some kind of demonstrative attack, for example, like it is in the nuclear doctrine of Russia, it will mean the end of non-proliferation policy in the world. And in 20 years, we will have dozens of countries with nuclear weaponry all around the whole planet. And that will mean that sooner or later we will have a nuclear war, big nuclear war. That is a disastrous scenario. We need to do everything to prevent it. And that is one of my messages. And to do it, we need to act both diplomatically. I think we should involve here India and China. It is very important also. And the second thing, Putin should understand that it will be a suicide for him personally and Russia. So the response will be military response from NATO.
OK, interesting with your views on India and China there. I wonder what your take is on Elon Musk. I mean, he is, in his opinion, trying to find peace, but his suggestion capitulating to some of Russia's demands in the form of Crimea, saying, why don't you just hand it over in the name of peace? Your take on that?
I think that Elon Musk, if he wants, he can give to Russia his shares of Tesla. I don't understand why he wants to give to Russia something which is not his. Crimea is Ukraine, it's our territory. And if Putin, it's very important, two things. First of all, if Putin will be successful in any way, for example, he will keep some part of Ukraine, for example, Crimea, it will mean that this aggressive policy is acceptable. That will mean that there is no international law. That will mean that the world is like a wild jungles after this, with predators like bear, like tiger, hunting for peaceful nations. I don't want to live in the world like this. And second thing is that we can't live, it's not only about territories, it's about our people. And Russia is committing genocide on occupied territories. How can we say, like seriously, let's leave people under genocide, let Russians kill them and rape them? I can't understand. So I think it's better for Elon to make business and not to make geopolitical propositions like this.
Thank you very much, Alexei. Really good to talk to you. Or as you say in Ukraine, diakuyu. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I've probably
Thank you.
Completely wrong there. But
anyway. Sentiment was there. Look, with the time 19 minutes past 7, let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines. And in a GB News exclusive interview, Donald Trump has praised the Prime Minister for following a tax-cutting plan. The former president also said King Charles has a great way about him, but thinks he has an agenda.
You know, he has a strong view on things. Probably difficult when you're the king. You want to have 100% of the people love you, like the Queen did. The Queen had everybody loved her, right? She didn't have that kind of an agenda, and yet, you know, she was a very strong woman. I got to know her too. She was a very strong woman, a great woman.
Train passengers are set for more travel chaos today as yet another strike starts. Members of the union ASLEF and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the industrial action will continue until the government intervenes.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act.
Let's get more now on those ASLEF strikes then. Industrial action taking place today in a row over pay. We can go live to Leeds, speak to our reporter Anna Riley, who's on the picket line there for us this morning. Anna, what's it like there? Are there union members there already? It looks like there are.
Good morning, Paul. Yes, there are union members. They've not let the rain dissuade them this morning. They're gathered on the picket line and there's a rather resolute mood here this morning. It's just ASLEF that are striking today, and that's the train drivers union. On Saturday they did join the RMT and 2 other unions. They all walked out for 24 hours, which caused the worst rail disruption this year in terms of striking, but it's just ASLEF today. They've got more than 21,000 members as part of their union, and their dispute is just around pay. So when RMT have gone on strike, they're looking at pay, conditions, jobs. Here, ASLEF and the train drivers, they're just concerned about their wages. They're saying that with inflation going up to 12%, they feel like they've taken a pay cut in effect because their salaries aren't rising with the cost of living. So that's why they've turned out today. They're wanting their train companies to do something, and they're wanting the government to do something to increase their salaries. And ASLEF's General Secretary is Mick Whelan. He said about the strike action that strikes are always the last resort. He said, "We don't want to inconvenience passengers. Our friends and families use public transport too. And we don't want to lose money by going on strike, but we've been forced into this position by companies who say that they've been driven to this by the government." So that's what their General Secretary says. And in terms of the strike action, National Rail are advising passengers today to check before they travel, only travel if it's absolutely necessary, because it's 13 different train companies that these train drivers are striking from, so it's going to really impact the network if you're using the train today, and we'll be providing more updates throughout the day on these strikes.
Good stuff, Anna. Thank you very much indeed. Stay with us after the break. We'll be going through the day's big sports stories with Paul Coyte, including Liverpool's win over Rangers in the Champions League last night.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A windy Wednesday and a wet start for many. Pretty mild out there this morning as well. Later on, we should see some brighter skies developing. But generally, it's a wet and windy start from this area of low pressure. It's been intensifying overnight, now crossing away from Scotland up towards the northern parts of the North Sea. But it's left behind a lot of wet weather this morning, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads, parts of the M6, the M8 in particular, but that rain is slipping south down across the Midlands now. After a dry start across eastern England, the rain will push in across Lincolnshire by lunchtime and then towards East Anglia in the southeast this afternoon. It will be clearing away from the south and from the northeast. Sunshine will follow, along with a whole raft of showers. It is blustery. It's quite mild out there this morning. Temperatures actually likely to be a bit lower this afternoon compared to this morning, generally in the mid-teens for England and Wales. 11 or 12 across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it'll feel colder because of the wind. A very blustery day then, staying pretty gusty overnight tonight. That rain will clear by late afternoon across East Anglia and the southeast, and then clear spells for most of England and Wales, but a lot of showers will keep coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will be a cooler night, certainly across the south. Temperatures down into single figures, staying at 9 or 10 across towns and cities further north, where there will still be a pretty strong wind blowing. A blustery day then on Thursday, not as windy as today, but some good spells of sunshine to come tomorrow for most of southern England, the Midlands, eastern England and much of eastern Scotland. The day's going to be dry and bright, but further west there will be a lot of showers coming in, parts of Wales, especially Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Still breezy, as I said, so again feeling cooler than these temperatures would suggest, but generally a little bit milder on Thursday compared to today, and staying gusty with further wet weather slipping south on Friday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 7:27. Still to come on the programme this morning, the list of the country's most popular baby names will be released later today. So at 7:45, we'll be finding out which names are in, which names are out. Do you think Isabel and Paul might make the... Probably not.
Possibly. I'm always interested in Nigel. And not just because of the Farage stuff. I mean, no, but apparently there was only one Nigel, like a few years ago. Only one person was christened Nigel.
Really?
Yeah, and it's quite a rare name. So is there a comeback for Nigel?
Yes.
And at 8:45, we'll be heading over to Holmes HQ to speak to our friend Eamonn. We'll find out how he's getting on as he recovers from back surgery.
Yeah, send in any well wishes that you'd like us to pass on to him, or indeed any other thoughts you might have throughout the course of the morning. GB Views at gbnews.uk, or tweet us at GB News.
So lots of Champions League action to get stuck into from last night, and also coming up tonight. Let's delve into it with the sports broadcaster, the aficionado, and all-round good egg, Paul Coyne.
Very nice, thank you. There's no Pauls, there's no Garys. No. Why do you not anybody think of christening a
No
baby
Garys,
Gary?
no Nigels, no Pauls.
Stevens, Michaels, they were all the kids I went to school with.
Apparently Bodie is one of them. If I say to you Bodie, what do you think of?
I think of the professionals.
There you go, that's what I said.
It's not where they're coming, Bodie and Doyle, though. They're not naming after the kids after Bodie.
No, there is some more modern reference point for the return of Bodie that I don't know.
Right, better talk about the Champions League then last night.
Yes.
Liverpool, are they back on track? Probably, maybe not quite as good as they have been before, but they beat Rangers 2-0. Trent Alexander-Arnold, you know, he's the big topic of conversation.
They were saying he was rubbish at football, but actually he's quite good.
He actually is quite good, and he scored a very good free kick. So the thing is, it looks as if he's not going to play in the World Cup for England, but Jurgen Klopp loves him and took him off towards the end. You know, got a huge round of applause. He's a good footballer, but they're questioning whether he's a great defender. He played very well yesterday, so you can't really argue with that. So 2-0 to Liverpool. Spurs and Eintracht Frankfurt, 0-0. Lots of chances, didn't put them away. So we'll see how that goes. They're going to play them again next week.
Yeah, tonight, Chelsea, AC Milan.
Chelsea, AC Milan.
Sounds quite good.
Milan, although Chelsea are bottom, if they beat AC Milan tonight, then they would go on to the same points as them. So it is all open. Chelsea, again, see, like Liverpool, they're not firing as good as they possibly could be or hope to be. So they're playing them at home. Manchester City playing FC Copenhagen. Shouldn't be a problem. And also Celtic are away at RB Leipzig. Leipzig are almost like the whipping boys of the. I don't want to say that yet because Celtic are going to play them. But again, it's double-header with them as well. So they're going away to Leipzig. So if Celtic want to do anything in the Champions League, they need to beat Leipzig tonight. So there's some good Champions League games going on. Johnny Bairstow.
England batsman.
Has won the England Cricketer of the Year because he's had a great summer.
Yeah.
But he won't be able to play in the 2022 World Cup, which is coming up just a couple of weeks away in Australia. Because of he's having the operation, as you see there. But it's a very bizarre. I don't know if you heard about how he actually got this.
He broke it on the golf course,
yeah,
but not playing golf. Wasn't it a random slip as he was walking around?
Walking towards the tee box. So he walks to. I hope they've got good insurance there at the golf club he was playing at. So he walks towards the golf to the tee, slips over, twists his ankle, and as he falls, he breaks his leg. I mean, how bizarre is that? You would think that golf would be, if anything was safe.
That's why so many sportsmen and women play golf, don't they? Because it's relatively safe.
Yeah, because there are other sports that they will not allow them to do.
Yeah.
It's like you get sports people are banned from riding motorcycles stuff because of the chance of injury, but playing golf now, maybe that would be on the ban list.
Yeah, it's par for the course. Baseball.
Very good. Very good.
I thought you'd ignore that.
No, I couldn't let it go. Let's talk about Aaron Judge now. I know Isabel is a huge fan of baseball and the New York Yankees. Now, Aaron Judge.
Absolutely.
Aaron Judge, as you know, is a superstar in the States.
Absolutely.
Now, look, what he's done is hit 62 home runs in a season, which is a record, and it's broken the 61, which was actually held since 1961. Now, the thing that I find really interesting is when it comes to sports memorabilia. Now, we've talked about this before.
Yeah, you love a bit of sports memorabilia.
I do love a bit. You know, I brought the jacket in, didn't I? You know,
yes,
remember the Conrad Bartelski skiing jacket, the smelly one with the questionable fur? But the thing is, that's not worth anything like the baseball that would have been hit with this home run. So when he hit 61, which was just a few days ago, so the ball comes over and everybody's desperate to catch it because it's worth so much money. So anyway, the guy leans over and they have the baseball mitt on, tries to catch it, falls out of his glove. That would have been worth, if he'd kept it,
Oh, no.
$350,000 that just slipped through his fingers. Now, the one that broke the record yesterday, so this is 62. So this is the world record. So this is the most anybody's hit.
Yeah.
So this would be a great piece of history. So the ball comes flying over. And, of course, everybody knows that this is worth a load of money.
Yeah.
One guy goes running forward towards it, slips over, falls over the cord and doesn't get it. Anyway, it falls into this guy's hand. He catches it. So this is the... So this, for the record, how much do you think this is possibly worth?
I don't know, 500,000.
His name's Corey Yeomans, and if he sells this ball, it could be worth £2 to £3 million. And this is
So he's just won the lottery, essentially.
Yeah.
Imagine it. So when you get...
You can see why that bloke was scrambling around to try and
I
get
know,
it and then
because
falls
he
over.
didn't care. He would happily fall 60 feet over the side and break his leg because for the $3 million...
It's worth it.
And you know when you often see it, and you hate it when you see in any sport, and you see the shirt gets thrown into the crowd and you get adults elbowing the kid out of the way and you think, this is disgusting. You know, when there's two
You
and
would
three...
do that.
I think I would be like, out of the way. I go, there we are.
Yeah.
There's $100, buy yourself some lollipops. Anyway, I'm going to take the ball.
Good ball,
So
yeah.
$2 to $3 million.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Amazing.
So someone actually did manage to get it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, security came straight up to him, hustled him away.
Well,
because,
yeah.
of course,
Get
everybody wants a
robbed.
piece of it. Yeah. So
Love
there you
it.
go.
Aaron
Paul,
Judd,
thank you.
what a man.
Pleasure.
Fantastic story. Paul Coyte, our sports broadcaster there. It is 7:34.
We're going to take a break. After that, we're back with the papers with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, GB News Breakfast with Isabel and Paul. Let's go through the papers this morning then. We're joined by David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. Morning, welcome back to both of you. David, the front of page of The Guardian. Tory turmoil amid claims of coup, quote-unquote, to oust trust. That coup word coming from a member of the Cabinet.
Not a Scottish anachronism.
It's over-the-top language, isn't it? I mean, I actually think Suella Braverman is actually... speaks her mind and will be a far better Home Secretary. Not that that's going to.
Well, presumably you liked what she had to say on immigration yesterday.
Well, I'm not a fanatical person about immigration, I just think the wrong sort of immigrants, a bit like we used to have the wrong sort of snow in the winter. We need immigration, but we need immigration of well-qualified people. I'm writing a book about English porcelain in the 18th century. No, seriously.
Where is this going? How is this linked?
And the man who founded back in the 18th century, the best porcelain manufacturer in England was French.
Right. OK.
Right.
So
you say we need more porcelain manufacturers?
Well, what we need are people who are skilled, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you turn up on a beach, shipped in by an Albanian drug gang, you're not likely to be a big asset to this country.
Wow.
Well, what if you're actually seeking asylum? I mean, she's saying you're not legally allowed to even apply, even if you're a legitimate asylum seeker. Bear in mind, there is no legal channel for those people to take.
No, but the point is, the asylum system is being abused. The whole idea of asylum was you could seek refuge in the first safe country you go to. Nowadays, it's used like a package tour. You know, you seek asylum, having gone through 10 other countries. And I mean, look, everyone will have their different opinion on it. Personally, I don't go to bed fretting about it, but I do think that we cannot afford, and that's what I think Suella Braverman thinks more to the point, that we cannot afford to have a situation where people are able to come into this country, jump the queue, avoid all the rules, because they claim they are asylum seekers when they'll have passed through France and God knows how many other countries. I mean, you don't have to have a very high opinion of France. I think it's a safe refuge. You know?
When I was in Lee in Manchester a few months ago, I spoke to an asylum seeker from Pakistan who'd been here 8 years waiting for her claim. 8 years.
8 years.
And do you know what the irony is? She said she wants to be a doctor, and she said to me, I don't want the 30 quid a month or whatever I'm getting. I'd much rather have been training to be a doctor and working while I was here at least.
Yeah, but you see, she could have trained as a doctor and then come to this country legitimately. No one's trying to keep doctors out. But I think this trail of people coming out of boats where they choose or think they have the right to choose whether they come to this country. It's an anarchy.
So what has Suella Braverman come out and said about this then? Is she completely pulling the plug on it?
That's what she's trying to do.
She's going to make it illegal for people to claim asylum coming in from France, and that her dream is to see the first flight to Rwanda take off before Christmas.
Yeah, and using the current legislation.
And she wants other ports to become like another Rwanda, doesn't she? She wants to furnish more places like Rwanda to deal with the mass immigration of people.
Yeah. She's still on this Rwanda kick. This is the most ludicrous idea. I mean, one didn't need to be especially mystic to say that if you're trying to send people to Rwanda, you'll never find a court who would agree with that. And of course, how many people have gone to Rwanda? None, or next to none.
Well, that was just as a lawyer, I wanted to ask your thoughts on how she was quite derogatory about lawyers yesterday.
Yeah, she was.
Even though she was the Attorney General and head of the bar in the UK.
But the thing about lawyers is, if there's money to be made, they'll make it. You know, what is it? Like the rhinoceros, thick-skinned, short-sighted, always ready to charge. That's lawyers. But basically, what they have to do is to say that people who turn up on beaches smuggled in have no right of access to the law. If you allow lawyers to come in on legal aid, and some of them make a fat amount of money out of it, of course, they will go into the legal system. But the question is, why should they? You know, it's one thing to be part of a legitimate process where you might then have a legal claim, to turn up on a beach somewhere and immediately you're showered with lawyers. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and 30,000 of them already this year. Look, I know our viewers will have strong opinions on this matter. Let us know your thoughts on what Suella Braverman had to say on immigration yesterday. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But on this Tory fatigue angle that we were discussing last hour, Claire, that this is a symptom, this unravelling of the Conservative Party is a symptom of having been in power for 12 years. Do you think that that's a fair analysis?
I do. And, you know, I'm moving to page 2 of The Sun. You must work until you're 68. Well, I hope that's not Liz Truss being PM until she's 68, because I don't think the country could stomach it. I don't think the country could take it. I don't think the country needs it. You must work until you're 68. That's only people that were born post 77. So you two are okay. We're not. Well, I'm not. But I don't mind. I don't mind working. I think it's great. I think as long as we have got all our faculties about us, then work. What's the problem? But, you know, you have to look at it another way as well. For me, the whole system, the financial system, is completely upside down. When you're a young parent or when you're a young person, you need more money. That's fact, because you've got more expenditure. When you're retired, hopefully, your mortgage is paid off. Not that mine ever will be, because I'm not a homeowner. But, you know, so you need less. And I think everyone is like looking to the forecasts, these financial forecasts. How much money do you need in your pension pot before you can retire? It's all about what you actually want and what you actually need. You need a lot more money when you're retired than you do when you're young. And I think that's the differential and everything being topsy-turvy. And I would much rather have had more money available to me as a young mother with my children, with my husband at the time, to be able to do the things that we wanted to do, instead of wait until maybe I've got dementia when I'm old, maybe I'll be too infirm, maybe I'll be dead. You know, so I'm much more the case, I would much rather people could actually live their lives, you know, without an awful lot of stress. And
maybe
I think
be with their children. So many people have to work so
yes,
hard,
exactly,
they can't even be with their children.
Exactly. And it's all
the grandparents that are doing the looking after the children.
If you're lucky enough to still remain in an area of the country that your parents are in, because it's so disparate. Communities are completely breaking down now. And now you need to work to your 68. Why?
Yeah.
Not that it would bother me, but why do we need to?
Yeah. GBviews at gbnews.uk. David, the headline in The Telegraph, "We must not fall for Putin's bluffs." Is this nuclear tactical nuclear weapons?
Well, what that is about allowing Putin to determine the way things go by making empty threats. The suspicion is that while Putin is probably ruthless enough to use tactical nuclear weapons, the fact that he's going to would be telegraphed to those who would be in a position to stop him, because once these delivery systems were on the move, it would be possible to take them out. He's sending a train that carries nuclear weapons. At the end of the day, what is being said in this interesting column in the Telegraph online is that you cannot have a situation where we are always, our knees are knocking that Putin is going to deliver a nuclear weapon, when the odds are the ancient stuff that he's got will probably end up blowing up, you know, part of Russia rather than blowing it up. I don't even want to joke necessarily about nuclear weaponry. But we cannot have the argument dictated by those kind of threats.
Yeah, so we have to call his bluff.
I think we do. Well, that's the argument advanced in the paper. And once again, you know, for me, the value of these newspapers is not old news, because it is old news by the time you read it in the newsstand. It's comment.
Yeah, no, the comment pages are an absolute delight, aren't they? Always great treat to read them. Speaking of Ukraine, interesting hearing Elon Musk wading into it all. And we were talking to a Ukrainian MP this morning about his views. And he had the wonderful line about if you know, because obviously he was suggesting, Elon Musk, that they should give away Crimea in the name of peace. And the Ukrainian MP saying, well, if he's so keen on giving away things that don't belong to him, why doesn't he just hand over his shares in Tesla, which is a fair point. But he's also talking about Twitter again, Claire, and this is in The Guardian. A £44 billion buyout is back on the table.
It's back on the table. As you know, he wanted to do a U-turn. He reneged on his initial purchase because he didn't believe Twitter. When Twitter said that they have less than 5% bots, and a bot is someone, an artificial being who is there on Twitter liking, you know, and has quite a market force in terms of how people can move about, in terms of
I thought a bot was something you sat on.
Well, okay, just park that there. Park your bot for a moment. So anyway, Twitter have completely denied it, and Elon Musk, being, I don't know how to describe him. Did we just say he's a character?
Narcissist.
Do we say, well, that was what the chap from University College Dublin called him in your interview earlier. I don't know. Anyway, he's now gone back and said, well, look, I'll buy it. forget what I've said. Forget I actually sent your CEO a poo emoji in response to something else. But yeah, let's just say that I will now buy it. And that's ahead, obviously, of the court case in Delaware that was supposed to start next week. And as
timing.
As David said, it's only the lawyers that are there. They're thick-skinned and ready to charge like a rhino. And that's exactly what's driving this. It's the lawyers. But don't forget, Elon Musk at the weekend is now trialling robots. And instead of costing millions, these people, because they're quite sentient actually, they're going to cost £13,000. And the discussion that we were having at the weekend was care homes will actually sometimes employ the use of a robot to take care of someone, because if they want to talk to an elderly person, an OAP, they will have everything programmed to talk about what times were like in the 40s, in the 50s, what happened. I think that's really scary.
Yeah.
Well, scary. It's really wrong,
it's completely wrong.
On lots of levels.
But Musk is a deeply annoying man, isn't he? My question for you today is he more annoying than Donald Trump? Or is Donald Trump more annoying than Elon Musk?
Well, what's your consent? What's your conclusion?
I actually think that while Trump is awful, I think there's something about Musk that every time I see I just sort of something.
I think maybe Musk pretends to be less offensive, perhaps, than Trump. Trump sort of trades on being quite offensive, whereas Elon Musk's trying to be the saviour of the world at the same time as...
He's quite funny, though. He is. I know. Well,
Which
both
one?
of them. I think Elon Musk is actually quite funny. He's got quite a good sense of humour.
Yeah.
Well, let
You
us
have
know
to
your
be
thoughts.
Elon Musk.
Who is worse, is David Mellor's question this morning, Donald Trump or Elon Musk?
Let's hear. Let's
Who's
have a
better?
public consultation.
Yes, let's poll on that, and we'll report back during the next paper review. For now, David Mellor, Clemeldine, thank you both infinitely.
Thank you.
It is 7:49. Let's bring you up to date with what is happening this morning.
Train passengers are set for more travel chaos today as yet another strike starts. Members of the union ASLEF and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. The ASLEF General Secretary Mick Whelan says the industrial action will continue until the government intervenes.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chail will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act.
Elon Musk has offered to buy Twitter for a second time. As we were just discussing, the social media giant confirmed its plans to accept a deal worth £38.3 billion. The SpaceX founder originally pulled out of that purchase in July, citing the number of fake or spam accounts on the platform.
You were going to say
Just
something.
talking of Elon Musk this morning, I want to segue that into our next topic, which is baby names, because he has a really strange... Well, he's got a lot of babies. I've lost count. I think something like 9. But one of his babies has the weirdest name. But I'm talking about that because today, the country's most popular baby names will be revealed.
I thought you were going to say Elon is on the list.
Well, Elon's quite an unusual name, but I don't know if it's common in South Africa, where he's from.
True. Olivia and Mohammed were top last year, but unisex names and ones taken from pop culture are on the rise. Here to tell us more is host of the Baby Name Envy podcast, SJ Strum. Welcome to TV News Breakfast. Your podcast is dedicated to baby names, that's it?
It's a baby name podcast and it's a dilemma podcast. So basically, we help parents choose the name they're going to love because so many people get stuck. I don't know if you found it hard to pick your baby name, but we end up with couples disagreeing, grandparents who don't like the name, and they send their dilemmas in, and then me and my sister research and basically help style a name for them.
That's brilliant.
It's
there's so
brilliant.
many cases of friends of mine who've had babies and the baby goes nameless. Right up, and you get, is it 40 days before you have to register?
That's right. And then it's illegal.
Yes,
after
so some
that.
people, you know...
People panic. There's a lot of baby name regrets. People are like, I just chose it because I felt like I had to announce it on Facebook.
Do you have any babies yet? Or
I do.
Yes.
Do you
have any baby name regret?
Not really. My baby's all kind of... My first one, I felt, chose his name, which I know is a strange thing to say, but I know a lot of people feel like babies come with a name. So I always say take a long list into the delivery room and then sort of pick, because he was 100% going to be Oscar. And then I just went, hi, Freddie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, my goodness. And then I've got Finn, which is a little bit of this popularity list is a very tense time if people are pregnant because you don't want your name to be too popular.
Yes.
So it's a strange dynamic. It's like normally popular is good, but in this case, I chose Finn. And the next year it had zoomed up the charts because it was a Star Wars name. And I was a bit devastated. And then my daughter's Evelina, which is pretty. Yeah, me and my husband, the reason I started the podcast is because I love crazy, rare names. So I wanted Blossom for her, I wanted Barnaby for him, and my husband's so traditional. We just couldn't agree. So I made a YouTube video, because I'm a YouTuber called Baby Name Wars, and people were like, this is exactly me. And then I made some list ideas of names I loved that were more rare, and people were like, do more and more. And then it just evolved into this huge business now and
it's
a podcast.
Funny because sometimes it's not just the couples that weighed in. I remember when, well, I don't remember, when I was born, apparently my mum said the argument was between her mother and my father, and she just said, well, you agree then on any name that you both are happy on, I'm happy with. And when it came to my littlest one's name, I went for Poppy, and I remember my mum saying, you can't call her Poppy. I was like, why? It's in the top 3 dog names. You can't call her a dog name. We went with Poppy, but, you know, there was strong
It doesn't sound like a dog name at all. I always say to people, do not ask your mum and dad because they're such different names. The names that are in style now, even there's a huge baby name boom at the moment. So where there would be, say, 45% of the population had a top 50 name, there's now about 35,000 names registered, and it gets more and more every year. So Oliver and Olivia have been #1 for like 6 years. I'm really hoping for a change, but it used to be there were 8,000 Olivers, and that made it #1. Now there's just 4,000 Olivers, but it's holding its #1 spot because we're seeing so many new names throughout the charts.
Oh, right. We had Mohammed at #1 as the top male
Mohammed.
name. How many of those do you know off the top of your head?
There will be around about 4,200 Mohammeds, but there's so many different spellings of it.
Right.
Yes.
But it's such a popular name. I don't think that will go out of style. We've had Olivia at #1 for the girls. I'm hoping that Ivy might come up because Ivy went into the top 10 at #6 last year, but it went up 200 places. So that could be the biggest game changer if Ivy went up. Hoping. Archie knocked Charlie out of the top 10 for boys last year.
I love that from a royal point of view, about the Sussexes.
I know, I'm
Well, do you
sure.
think well, actually, on that note, do you think there could be a resurgence of Charles? Obviously, it's probably a bit late for this list, but maybe next year.
Next year, I think certainly Elizabeth and all of the variations, Eliza, Elspeth, the Scottish, Lilibet, for sure. And I think Charles will. I mean, Charlie, Henry, George, we've got our traditional boy names, and we like
I've got a William, and I just love a classic name.
Yeah, I've got a Freddie, and I love that name, they're timeless. And I think for our boys, we quite like a traditional, timeless name.
What about people who call their child the first name that is also the same as the surname, as in Gary Neville's father, famously Neville Neville?
Neville. Such a missed opportunity. Must not have written into the podcast. It's a strange thing. It used to be very traditional that you would just be named after, your granddad, and then that would be, and we still see that. We get a lot of people writing in going, total disaster. I've got married and my husband's family, they're all called Frank. And I do not want to call my baby Frank. And they feel quite upset, robbed of the chance to name their baby. But we are seeing a bit of a resurgence of that. We might see the name Paul come back, actually.
Oh, you heard it here first.
Yeah.
There's a good biblical name, isn't it?
Well, yeah, true. The Bible's been around for a while, though.
But a classic. It's a classic.
There were still 111 baby Pauls last year. But what we're seeing chatting to parents over the last couple of years since the pandemic is honouring a living relative has become more popular again. So we used to go right back in time. We didn't want to name our baby after our dad or our granddad. It was the great-granddad names like Albert. But because we lived so much of our time separated, we're seeing things like maybe Gary, maybe Paul, a bit more of the dad names coming back. People really felt it was important to honour their living relatives.
My top tip, if you marry someone who insists you have to name your first child after the male name. My cousin married a Rupert, the 5th Rupert in long succession. She was mortified, but she got carte blanche with the second child.
Right.
So they've got Rupert, and then she got to choose Sienna.
So he was Rupert the 5th?
We call him 5 for short, just as an alternative. Anyway, there's the top tip. SJ, thank you so much. Enjoyed that. Love a baby name chat. Also, my other tip, if you've got a wild name, just give it to your pet. I'm saving Ripley up for when I get a cat. I quite like that name.
OK. All right. That works.
Yeah.
There you go.
I did that.
7:56. Coming up, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, will bring us analysis of that upcoming speech from Liz Truss. But in the meantime, let's find out how the weather's shaping up today.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A windy Wednesday and a wet start for many. Pretty mild out there this morning as well. Later on, we should see some brighter skies developing. But generally, it's a wet and windy start from this area of low pressure. It's been intensifying overnight, now crossing away from Scotland up towards the northern parts of the North Sea. But it's left behind a lot of wet weather this morning, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads, parts of the M6, the M8 in particular, but that rain is slipping south down across the Midlands now. After a dry start across eastern England, the rain will push in across Lincolnshire by lunchtime and then towards East Anglia and the southeast this afternoon. It will be clearing away from the south and from the northeast. Sunshine will follow, along with a whole raft of showers. It is blustery. It's quite mild out there this morning. Temperatures actually likely to be a bit lower this afternoon compared to this morning, generally in the mid-teens for England and Wales. 11 or 12 across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it'll feel colder because of the wind. A very blustery day then, staying pretty gusty overnight tonight. That rain will clear by late afternoon across East Anglia and the southeast, and then clear spells for most of England and Wales, but a lot of showers will keep coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will be a cooler night, certainly across the south. Temperatures down into single figures, staying at 9 or 10 across towns and cities further north, where there will still be a pretty strong wind blowing. A blustery day then on Thursday, not as windy as today, but some good spells of sunshine to come tomorrow for most of southern England, the Midlands, eastern England and much of eastern Scotland. The day is going to be dry and bright, but further there will be a lot of showers coming in, parts of Wales, especially Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Still breezy, as I said, so again feeling cooler than these temperatures would suggest, but generally a little bit milder on Thursday compared to today, and staying gusty with further wet weather slipping south on Friday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Liz Truss hits back at party rebels as she prepares to address conference today.
Good morning, it's 8:01 on Wednesday the 5th of October. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Paul Hawkins.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Prime Minister will use a speech today to defend her economic strategy, attacking what she calls an anti-growth coalition.
Comes on the last day of a Conservative Party conference dominated by internal division. Elsewhere this morning, migrants crossing the Channel could face a ban on seeking asylum under new rules proposed by the Home Secretary. Speaking yesterday, Suella Braverman said her goal was to cut net migration by tens of thousands.
Ukrainian forces in the south of the country have made dramatic gains, pushing into areas around the occupied city of Kherson. Russia no longer has full control of any of the regions that it illegally annexed last week.
And later in the programme, we'll be getting an update from the one and only Eamonn Holmes. He'll be coming to us live from home to tell us how he's getting on as he recovers from back surgery.
And as always, we love to hear from you throughout the programme. Do send us your thoughts on any of the topics. Indeed, send your well wishes to Eamonn as well. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Now, top story this morning, then, the Prime Minister using a speech later today to defend her economic strategy, arguing that disruption is the price of success.
Well, at the end of a Conservative Party conference that's been dominated by internal division, she'll also attack what she calls an anti-growth coalition who oppose her plans.
Well, yesterday, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, sat down for an interview with the Chancellor, who admitted the mini-budget delivery could have been better.
A very quick time that we did it. And also you've got to remember the context. I mean, what was extraordinary about that month was that we had a new government and also we had the sad passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So we had a nation in mourning. And then literally, I think 4 days after the funeral, we had the mini budget. It was high speed, high pressure environment. And we could have got, as David Cameron used to say, prepared the pitch a bit better.
Well, let's speak to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, who is on the money. And Liam, that was a news-making interview, front page of The Star this morning, with that quote about quasi, it's all the Queen's fault. And of course, the big thing that a Chancellor needs to do is try and provide certainty for the markets. And he then made an O-turn, as it's now being described, not just a U-turn, but back to where it was in the first place, on the date of his fiscal plan. What's going on? Oh dear, we seem to have a sound problem. Can we just...
Can you hear me?
We can,
Isabel?
fantastic.
That's better. Yeah, Liam, the O-turn.
Celebrating on two fronts. You can hear me, I can hear you, and we've made the front page of the Daily Star. Happy day. There is some confusion behind. There is some confusion behind the scenes. The Chancellor told me, and indeed the Prime Minister herself told GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey in interviews for GB News yesterday that crucial fiscal statement, which is being kind of held out as a beacon on a hill, something that will calm down the financial markets, where the government explains how it's going to finance the tax cuts and deal with public spending issues going forward. They both told us, the two most senior people in the country in terms of politics, it would be on the 23rd of November. At the very same time, their advisors, their allies were briefing to us, actually, we think it might be a little bit earlier. So we wait and see until when that will happen. But I think these kind of process issues will be taking second stage this morning, because the Prime Minister is preparing to give her keynote conference speech. Of course, this is her first conference as Conservative Prime Minister. We're expecting that speech about 11 o'clock. And it will be all about trying to rally the troops, trying to put these differences that we've seen over the last few days behind them, trying to motivate the Conservative activists, which really are the people who come to conference for the most part, the people who stuff envelopes, who knock on doors, who these days manage email databases of voters and potential voters, rallying them to go out there and trying to sell that Conservative message. The problem is there's still quite a lot of there's a lot of argument about what that Conservative message actually is.
Do the markets have confidence and trust in her, do you think? Because it was going to be the 23rd of November, then it wasn't, then it is, now it might not be, and we still don't have a new date. The longer that carries on, surely the markets will get more and more jittery.
Look, I think financial markets have settled. The pound is now well above where it was before the mini budget. It's been $1.13, $1.14. It went all the way down to $1.03, of course, in the immediate aftermath of that mini budget. Borrowing costs in what we call the 10-year gilts market. What is that? That's the kind of wholesale market for money where the government borrows. Those interest rates ripple out across the whole of the rest of the economy for mortgage holders, those with personal loans, of course. Interest rates on those money markets, they're now well below 4%. They were up at 4.5% in the aftermath of the mini budget. But what's going on here, Paul, even though the markets do seem to have a lot more confidence, there's a long-term trend here that's got nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with U-turns and O-turns, nothing to do with exclusive interviews with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and everything to do with long-term trends. The long-term trend here, as we wean ourselves off those emergency measures that followed the 2008 financial crisis, ultra-low interest rates, very, very loose monetary policy, lots of money printing by central banks around the world. As all that comes to an end, interest rates will rise. Borrowing costs will rise. The question is how quickly they will rise and to what level. And no politician really controls that. That is about long-term economic trends. And I think what the Prime Minister is going to have to do is just, and the Chancellor, and he did a little bit of it in that interview with me yesterday when he gave himself a chance to sit down and actually explain himself. What they need to do is to really level with the British people and tell them that we are at the whim of some of these long-term trends, and the government's growth package, far from causing more turmoil, will actually try and protect us from these long-term trends, providing help for hard-pressed families as borrowing costs rise. It's a narrative that's quite difficult to sell. It's quite a complicated message, but it strikes me, Isabel and Paul, that unless the government starts selling it soon, then voters are going to start showing some serious discontent.
That's a great point, Liam. Thank you so much for joining us. That's our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, joining us from Birmingham, where the Prime Minister will be speaking at 11 o'clock.
That's right, and we'll have full coverage of that here on GB News, as you would expect. But for more reaction to what Liam was saying, and indeed expectation of what the Prime Minister will be saying later, let's speak to the political editor for the news site Tortoise Media, Kat Neelan. Welcome back to the programme, Kat. Do you think, as Liam was saying there then, they've got to really try and prove this to the electorate, or do you think perhaps it's too late, given the polls and some of the damage that's been done?
Well, arguably, this is the point when Liz Truss really needs to speak to the MPs as much as anything, because having spent the last few months just talking to the selectorate, the Tory members, she actually needs to try and win back support in Parliament. What we are looking at, when she comes back next week, is a possibility that they may vote down some of the measures in the mini-budget. That is obviously why she had to U-turn on the 45p tax rate. And, of course, we've seen sort of lots of intimations of rebellions yet to come, including from some of her own ministers.
Yeah, I mean, there's two debates going on here. There's the policies themselves. Should benefits be outrated in line with inflation? Mm-hmm. Should there be a U-turn on the foot? And then there's also the communication of the policy, whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, and I mean, Liz Truss, again, she spent much of the campaign saying she's not the most polished performer, she's not the best speaker. That's part of the problem. But it's not just about how she speaks, it's also about the sort of wider package, the pitch rolling. As they said, they didn't prepare the markets for some of these things. And we get, we understand the 45p abolition of that rate was not discussed even with some of the other members of Cabinet. It was very tightly held secret. So, you need to be able to kind of sort of forewarn people about what's going to happen. And actually with this, 23rd of November date, we were listening to Mel Stride yesterday, chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, not a big troublemaker by any stretch of the imagination, saying, we need that to happen. And he was welcoming the news that it was going to happen before the next MPC meeting, which is on the 3rd of November. If now that doesn't happen.
That's the Monetary Policy Committee
which sets the base rate. And so, we did see markets sort of suggest that maybe interest rates wouldn't go up by as much. But if that doesn't happen, we could still see them go up by quite a lot. So I think Liam's right that things are stabilising. However, talk of disruption in Liz Truss's speech today maybe a bit too close to the bone.
Yeah, and I think, there are also very obvious problems with discipline when you've got members of the cabinet quite clearly disagreeing not only with each other but with her policies. She's said on benefits specifically they are undecided. Then you've got Penny Mordaunt and Robert Buckland coming out saying they think it should rise in line with inflation. I mean, it's all over the place, isn't it? You've got then Suella Braverman saying that she felt that some members of the party were staging a coup. And then Kemi Badenoch, also in cabinet, calling that inflammatory. You know, for anyone at home who thinks that the media is driving the crisis at the centre of this, only has to look at what's coming out of the mouths of the cabinet to understand that's not the case.
The blue on blue attacks yesterday were quite incredible, and it was one of those things where you kind of see lots of small fires developing everywhere.
All afternoon.
And when will they kind of form one great big explosion? You know, I mean, I think one of the other problems that Liz Truss has got today is, of course, the train strikes mean that a lot of people have already left. So how many people is she actually going to be speaking to? And that could be very bad optics for a woman that's already struggling to, you know, kind of put across this idea that she has popular appeal.
Yeah. Is she past the point of no return when it comes to regaining authority?
You know, I think Tory MPs have got a sort of a lot of soul searching to do at the minute. You know, it's a difficult position to be in. There are no good options left. You know, do you ditch another Prime Minister third in 3 years, or do you kind of ride out and hope for the best? That's kind of the calculations they're making now. Ironically, I think some of the people that are sort of more willing to kind of give her the sort of benefit of the doubt are perhaps the people that tried to get rid of Boris Johnson before, the sort of One Nation sort of moderates.
Such as who?
Well, you know, some of my sources.
Come on.
Just saying, you know, they are so scared about the prospect of Boris Johnson coming back that actually they'd kind of rather stick with her. But there are obviously an awful lot of people who don't share those feelings and would rather Boris came back. You know, Nadine Dorries, for example.
Interesting. Although she said yesterday evening, having called for an election in the morning, she said in the evening that Boris is very much saying back Liz, which wasn't what she appeared to be saying in the morning. So, gosh, it's a fickle old game, isn't it? Kat Nealon, always interesting to get your insights. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Well, let's go back to the conference floor in Birmingham, where we're joined by Dr Sandesh Gulhane, the Shadow Health Minister for Scotland. Thank you for joining us this morning. First of all, what did you make of Theresa Coffey's speech yesterday?
Well, I think, good morning. I think what we found is Theresa has quite a lot of wants that she's looking to mobilise the NHS in England. She set out the ABCD way, and one of the big announcements was about seeing your GP in 2 weeks. Now, I am a practising NHS doctor along with being a politician, and I think seeing your GP in 2 weeks is important, and I think all GPs out there would agree with that. But what we need to be able to facilitate that is we need an expanded primary care team, we need people to be able to see pharmacists, people being able to see physios, and we need a flow through the hospital to release that demand to allow GPs to do our job. But look, let's be absolutely clear. GPs, primary care in England, in Scotland, it's the cheapest way of getting healthcare and it's the best in the world.
Most people watching you this morning or listening to you will say everything you say is completely true, but unfortunately yesterday the Health Secretary's speech was completely overshadowed by all the infighting within the party, and there is fatigue. We could see it from the delegates, many of whom were asleep during her speech.
Well, look, I think what we need to do is decrease the temperature. We need to be having moderate conversations, and we need to be ensuring that we do fall behind the Prime Minister, who's only been in post a short while. Now, I think what we're seeing here is a reaction to the budget. I think that's what we're really seeing. And as the Prime Minister has said, the groundwork wasn't laid for the 45p tax rate. So she quite rightly decided that that's not something that we would continue with. But actually, let me say a couple of things about the budget. We don't want to cut public services. Public services are vital. So we need to increase growth, increase productivity, get more money. And the way to do that is actually people who are earning middle to low incomes to have more money in your pocket, to feel as though you can be more productive. And by doing that, by cutting taxes, actually, paradoxically, you actually increase the amount of money that overall the government takes, which increases the budget, which then allows you to do the things you want and protect the public services. And just on public services, let's look at Scotland, where Humza Yousaf, the Health Secretary in the fully devolved Scottish Health Service, announced a winter plan, which was full of self-congratulatory remarks, but no actual plan. And in Scotland, I am terrified for the patients because winter is very worrying, and I'm really worried that we have no actual plan from my Health Secretary, and I have actually set out a whole list of solutions for this.
All right, really good to talk to you. Thank you for your time this morning. Scottish Conservative Shadow Health Secretary Sandesh Gulhani joining us from Birmingham, where the Prime Minister will be speaking later this morning.
Now, after a party conference that has been overshadowed by division and a U-turn and an O-turn, as we've been discussing this morning, do Conservative supporters actually miss our former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson?
Alice Porter is in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Boris Johnson's constituency. Alice, has anyone been talking to you about the former Prime Minister?
They have indeed. I mean, it's important to stress this has been a very safe Tory seat ever since it was first created. And I have been here so many times over the last 6 months or so, getting people's reaction to the various shenanigans that were going on in Westminster surrounding Boris Johnson. And I have to say, my impression was, generally speaking, there was a strong degree of loyalty to Boris Johnson. But that doesn't mean that they have a strong degree of loyalty to Liz Truss. I think in some cases, far from it, because what we're seeing from the two Prime Ministers is quite different policies in many ways. So, for example, we've seen the reverse to the increase to universal credit, which was, an initiative that Boris Johnson was bringing in. And then at the same time, yesterday at the Tory party conference, Liz Truss didn't confirm whether benefits would rise in line with inflation. And again, that was a policy that Boris Johnson had confirmed to the public. So we're getting different policies from the two Prime Ministers, and for Conservative voters, that does not necessarily mean that they're continuing to have support for the party. I was out and about in Uxbridge speaking to people yesterday about the two Prime Ministers, and this is what they had to say.
I wish they hadn't pushed Boris out. I think he's hit the ground running from day one, and he hasn't really been given a chance to actually just be Prime Minister without all this Brexit and COVID and everything else in Ukraine. So I hope he gets a chance to have another go.
I think she's really reliant on her cabinet. I do miss, Boris Johnson. He had a lot more support behind him.
Don't basically miss Boris Johnson. I don't think Liz is doing a better job. Because already, I think as soon as she came out, they're saying I think in billions we're in debt already. As soon as she came in, I think she's trying to help, but I don't think she's going to last for long.
Yeah, he did a few things wrong, and a lot of people but he did a lot of things right. And yes, I miss him a lot.
What do you dislike about what Liz Truss is doing at the moment?
I think she's for the rich and not for your middle-class people.
He's been sacked from every job he's ever had for lying. And although I think that from an integrity perspective, Liz Truss probably isn't like that, I don't think she's the right person to lead the country.
Do you think Uxbridge and South Ruislip could vote Labour in the next election?
I think that there are very many places in the country, including here, that would absolutely have a bigger turnaround.
Well, there you go. Some thoughts of people speaking in Uxbridge to me yesterday. I think that final lady made a very interesting point, because it's only 18 months to go until the next general election. And the latest YouGov poll a few days ago put Labour significantly ahead of the Tories. And what does that mean for seats like this, which have been traditionally safe Tory seats? For example, this one, Boris Johnson only won by a very slim majority in 2017, by just over 5,000 votes, which was the smallest majority of any sitting Prime Minister since 1924. And with the cost of living crisis continuing to be such a big issue for people around the country, seats like this may not be so safe for the Conservatives.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you very much, Alice. That's our reporter Alice Porter in Uxbridge for us this morning.
With the time at 8:20, let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. And in a GB News exclusive interview, Donald Trump has praised the Prime Minister for following a tax-cutting plan. The former president also said King Charles has a great way about him, but thinks he has an agenda.
He has a strong view on things. Probably difficult when you're the king. You want to have 100% of the people love you, like the Queen did. The Queen had everybody loved her, right? She didn't have that kind of an agenda, and yet, she was a very strong woman. I got to know her too. She was a very strong woman, a great woman.
Today, another rail strike. Today, more travel chaos with another strike starting, this time with members of the union ASLEF and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chahal will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act.
After the break, it's Dyslexia Awareness Week. We'll meet fashion designer Jake Posner, the newest ambassador for the British Dyslexia Association. All that to come after the weather.
Good morning, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A windy Wednesday and a wet start for many. Pretty mild out there this morning as well. Later on, we should see some brighter skies developing. But generally, it's a wet and windy start from this area of low pressure. It's been intensifying overnight, now crossing away from Scotland up towards the northern parts of the North Sea. But it's left behind a lot of wet weather this morning, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads, parts of the M6, the M8 in particular, but that rain is slipping south down across the Midlands now. After a dry start across eastern England, the rain will push in across Lincolnshire by lunchtime and then towards East Anglia and the southeast this afternoon. It will be clearing away from the south and from the northeast. Sunshine will follow, along with a whole raft of showers. It is blustery. It's quite mild out there this morning. Temperatures actually likely to be a bit lower this afternoon compared to this morning, generally in the mid-teens for England and Wales. 11 or 12 across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it'll feel colder because of the wind. A very blustery day then, staying pretty gusty overnight tonight. That rain will clear by late afternoon across East Anglia and the southeast, and then clear spells for most of England and Wales, but a lot of showers will keep coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will be a cooler night, certainly across the south. Temperatures down into single figures, staying at 9 or 10 across towns and cities further north, where there will still be a pretty strong wind blowing. A blustery day then on Thursday, not as windy as today, but some good spells of sunshine to come tomorrow for most of southern England, the Midlands, eastern England and much of eastern Scotland. The day's going to be dry and bright, but further west there will be a lot of showers coming in, parts of Wales, especially Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Still breezy, as I said, so again feeling cooler than these temperatures would suggest, but generally a little bit milder on Thursday compared to today, and staying gusty with further wet weather slipping south on Friday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:26. Still to come on the programme this morning. In around 20 minutes, we'll be checking in with Eamonn Holmes. He's been missing us for the last few days, or I've been missing him more. Like I've just seen on social media, he's been blaming me for this operation. So I'll be having a word with him about that. That's, as I say, in about 20 minutes' time.
Also, after 9 o'clock, we're joined by footballing legend Sir Geoff Hurst as he looks forward to this year's World Cup in Qatar. And before that, we're speaking to the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, about Liz Truss's speech on the final day of the Conservative conference later this morning.
So a busy hour right ahead. We've had lots of views coming in. Thank you for them. We were talking about baby names just before at the end of the 7 o'clock hour. Linda in Derbyshire says, I have a female dog called Fauve. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Fauve, which means wild beast, and she's a white, fluffy Bichon Frise with the softest, lovable nature.
Yeah, Hayley in Kent, I just wanted to let you know that my nan had the most amazing name, Minnie Henrietta. She was a force to be reckoned with, but was a fantastic nan. Always had a batch of buns on the worktop for anyone who called in.
Joanne says, my grandchildren are called Bruce. Now, that's a name you don't hear very often. He's nearly 2. And Peggy, who is 6 months, wasn't keen on the name Bruce before he came along, but when he did, he absolutely suited it.
Not many Bruces around. gbviews@gbnews.uk if you want to get in touch with us about names or anything else.
Right, this week is Dyslexia Awareness Week. It shines a light on how people with the learning difficulty battle with day-to-day challenges.
Joining us now is the newest ambassador of the British Dyslexia Association, Jake Posner. Jake, thank you for joining us this morning, especially on what must be quite a proud day for you to become an ambassador for the British Dyslexia Association.
Yeah, I mean, it's an honour, to be honest, for me. Something that I lived with since I was 8 or 9. So to be able to sort of share my sort of learning difficulty with dyslexia and sort of hopefully inspire at least one person to go on and achieve their dreams and achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's not just about helping those people who might have dyslexia to go on and achieve their dreams, but it's also about educating people who may misunderstand it. You know, somebody like me who understood it better once I heard Matt Hancock explaining his own personal experience, totally changed my opinions. And it was an absolute light bulb moment when the way he explained, the way he sees words as pictures and memorise words rather than reading the letters as images, which was just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think that with dyslexia, it can be a very visual learning experience. I find that with my dyslexia, I'm more creative. I like telling stories, and I like making things out of sort of nothing and researching and finding new ways of doing things. And for me, I think that that's a really important strength that needs to be recognised within dyslexia. I think that in terms of education, I think that things might need to change. It's not so much like a one-size-sort-of-fits-all experiment anymore. I think that we need to evolve and adapt and cater for different people. And I think that side of things in education, if we picked it up from a young age and taught people in a way that they can really learn, that would be a much better way of doing things and a big step forward.
And schools and parents and society are getting better at picking it up from an early age, but it does still get missed.
Yeah, it does still get missed. I think I was diagnosed when I was 8 or 9, which was really helpful to me and also to my parents and to my school because it allowed them to understand that maybe, you know, I might not be so good at English, might not be so good at maths, but I can excel in other areas. You know, my English teacher once told me that I could be an author, but my grammar's awful, my spelling's awful. It sort of gave me that boost of confidence, but at the same time, it was like, well, if my grammar's that bad, why don't you sort of help me and find a structure that could benefit me? So, yeah, I mean, we do have our strengths.
Yeah, really inspirational to hear about, you know, the sorts of people that have gone on to achieve great things with dyslexia. I mean, I talked about Matt Hancock, and he was giving an example of during the pandemic when we had those big briefings with Boris Johnson and the chief scientific officers. Jonathan Van Tam was at number 10, trying to phonetically get him to learn some of the words associated with COVID at the time. It was fascinating and very inspirational, I'm sure, to people who have dyslexia. Are there any other high-profile people that you think should be held up as good examples?
Yeah, I mean, someone like Steven Spielberg, for example, a very creative movie director who's achieved all sorts of levels of success. You know, he's gone on to sort of like overtake Hollywood and have some of the most famous movies of all times. You've got people like Muhammad Ali. I'm a big sports fan in general, so when I see people who have dyslexia and they're representing it in a sporting environment, that's really inspiring for me as well.
In fact, you've got that list there, and almost everyone on that list of 6 people is from a creative industry, and there's Matt Hancock.
Yeah, which is really interesting to see, I guess. But again, I guess that sort of shows that, you know, maybe while a lot of us might be creative, there might also be other strengths in other areas, such as being an MP.
How much of a game changer is a diagnosis? I mean, what does it mean for people with dyslexia? I mean, we hear about people getting extra time in exams, but I mean, that's only one part of it.
That is only one part of it. I think that as soon as you know that you have dyslexia, you can really embrace your way of thinking, and you can sort of be a bit more proud about it. I mean, I always shouted about it. My brand is designed and formulated around dyslexia. So like what you said with Matt Hancock about how he learns words and how he spells out words, I break mine down into syllables. So, for example, like for my first collection, it's debut. So there's a hyphen after the B and before the U, because I break that down into a syllable to learn how to spell it, and I sound it out that way.
Cool.
So that's my dyslexia.
So it kind of and that may not be immediately obvious to you. They'll just think you're being very creative, which you are, but then you also, there's a hidden message there.
Yeah, I wanted my brand to be formulated around dyslexia because it's important to me.
Yeah.
And I do want to shout about it, and I do want to sort of break those boundaries and break those barriers.
How can people, if they're worried about their children, or indeed if they're a young person wanting a diagnosis or some more advice on all of this, where can they go? Is there somewhere they can go for some British Dyslexia Association tips?
Yeah, I mean, the British Dyslexia Association are great. They've got lots of info on their website, also like on their social platforms as well. And also for me to become an ambassador, I want to be able to also reach out and help people and talk to people. I work with an amazing photographer on Monday. She reached out to me because she could relate to the brand because she's also dyslexic. And she sent me a message on Instagram, and I was like, you know what, like, let's work together, let's do something. And we created some really great content. And for me, that's all part of being an ambassador, of being able to help and support people.
Yeah, and part of British Dyslexia Awareness Week, which is what it is this week.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I imagine there will be more events to raise awareness and profile.
They do a lot of events, the British Dyslexia Association. They're great with what they do.
Yeah, and there's more info on their website. Joe, thanks for speaking to us this
Thank you for having me.
So much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Right, do stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're going to check in on Eamonn. We're going to do a little doctor's appointment or maybe a nurse's appointment, make sure he's OK, make sure he's in good health, ready to come back and join us on The Breakfast Show just as soon as he is. Stay tuned for that. That's after the papers.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:36. Time to go through the papers one last time this morning with David Mellor and Claire Muldoon. Welcome back to both of you. I haven't got a list. I've just realised I haven't got a papers list, so I don't know where we're starting. Sorry. Been so busy.
Tory...
David... Oh, there we go.
There's only one place to start, really, this morning. Tory troubles, David. Headline, Acrimony and Ashen Faces as Unity unravels, which we will be putting to James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, surely.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Guardian. And quite often, The Guardian is unfair to the Conservative Party, and it's the sad state of the Conservative Party at the moment that it's not really unfair. It seems to be exactly right. This review of what's happening in Birmingham, and, you know, what one source, obviously prominent source, said to The Guardian writers that her job is getting us out of the ditch and back on the road. Well, that doesn't sound very likely. A former cabinet minister remarked glibly, "This is the kind of chaos you only see at the end of a premiership. It's impossible for her to recover." And, of course, the first people over the top electorally will be local government, for local government elections. And a Conservative leader of a local council said, "We're already looking at data, and there will be a wipeout next year at this rate, all because trusts can't communicate with people." This is character assassination. But I wish one could say that's unfair, but sadly that isn't. And the real problem, adding my little bit to The Guardian, she chose not to put in anybody who had been too closely associated with her predecessor. So, you know, people were slung out because they were on the wrong bit of the party. She only got, as one of the paper's advisors, only 50 Tory MPs was she the first choice. And so she doesn't really come from a position of strength.
Yeah, and, you know, one wonders what the best outcome from all of this is, because you just have to think what's best for country right now, and, you know, whether or not we try and find the common ground, Claire. And when I say we, you know, all of us, whether it's, you know...
the mainstream media, whether it's the electorate, whether it's the politicians
or if
themselves.
that's never going to happen.
I don't think it will. And I think, you know, the mainstream media has, you know, is guilty of of quite a lot of things. I think they're guilty of slaying Boris. Boris could easily have just done it by himself, but the mainstream media really pushed that. I think the Conservatives will rue the day they got rid of him. And then us as a public, we really need to be more informed and more engaged on a political level.
But don't you think the public have been cut out of all of this?
Isabel, we're all members of the public as well, and I feel so apathetic. I feel so politically homeless at the moment that there's nothing, absolutely nothing that can get me back on board, you know, to even engage at a level. I mean, it's ridiculous what's happening over the 4 unions of the United Kingdom.
Well, look, we've covered it comprehensively throughout the programme. We've got James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, coming up at the end of this hour. So should we change the subject for a little while, Claire, in this final pay-per-view and talk about fussy foods? I mean, you've got, how many children? 4. You've seen it all, done it all.
Are they still fussy about foods? Because
they were never fussy about foods. They were never allowed to be fussy about foods.
So you've got the piece in the Mirror here, but there's also in the Sun, and this is a survey of 1,000 children aged between 5 and 11. And what have they found?
They've found that there's 10 foods kids like least, OK? And they've been revealed. Brussels sprouts, cabbage, onions, mushrooms, avocados, cauliflower. Well, I don't think they've taken the avocados from Barnes or Chiswick, because
I mean, my children, pretty much from...
So cauliflower, fish, beetroot, broccoli or beef. I mean, what are they going for here? And as parents or carers of children, I'm sorry, you eat what you're given and that is it. There are enough cooking programmes out there. There are enough, what do you call them, recipe books, you know, out there.
Yeah.
You know,
were they allowed to leave the table then?
No,
if they hadn't eaten their sprouts?
No, they weren't. And I'll tell you something else. When my son lost a game of rugby, he didn't get any dinner.
Sorry?
Yeah. What? That was it.
When he lost the game of rugby?
When he lost it.
Hang on, you denied your child food?
I did.
That's
there was
a big
no
admission.
dinner for him.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, he went on to be a very successful rugby player.
Yes, and indeed he still is.
He was hungry.
Is that fair, David?
Hungry for...
Are you surprised to hear that?
Yeah.
Oh,
you're
also,
not.
Wait, I should
I've
say,
known you
David,
for years.
You've been advocating for shop-bought roast potatoes this morning. We've had a lot of uproar on the GB News inbox about that. Very disappointed in you. Lots of people saying, just parboil a lovely little potato.
Hang on.
Cut it in half.
But before we get to the parboil, can you peel a potato?
Have you ever?
No, good Lord.
Have you ever peeled a
Hilarious.
potato?
Hilarious.
Never.
You've never peeled a potato?
But I don't see the point.
Well, because it's got the skin on it and it helps you to boil it and cut it. And
No, there are
That's
certain
what
things.
Aunt Bessie's for.
Yeah, I like to cook, for instance, a joint and get it absolutely right. But what I cannot do is mess about with veggies. I mean, can you imagine peeling potatoes? I mean, you'll never get that time back again in the whole life. You know?
It only takes a minute or two.
Well, maybe a skilled person like you, it'd take me hours. I'd probably end up
One of my few strengths. People always say, I tell you what, he's rubbish. But when it comes to peeling potatoes, that man is a genius.
One thing we can agree on, the time we will never get back on, is that lost to COVID. The inquiry starting yesterday, David, in The Guardian, page 7. Anger of bereaved families, very much the focus of their piece.
And some people, you know, I was at university with Heather Hallett, and I've spent my life engaged in trivia, and there she is, Lord Justice, chairing this inquiry. But she'll do a good job because she's not one of those intimidating, rather up themselves judges. But it's going to be very controversial because what she wants to do is to get it done, not taking years, and therefore she wants to be able to take the voices in general, but a lot of people want to come and have their day, maybe more than one day, in court, talking about their particular case. Now, you can understand that, but poor Heather will be tearing her hair out because how does she deliver on time? And what a lot of people in government will be wanting, you know, is an inquiry that takes minutes and wastes years. And she can't afford to do that.
And the other thing, the focus on the inquiry will cover 8 points. Now, the bereaved families, I mean, Heather Hallett sums it up perfectly, I think, when she says, there is one word that sums up the pandemic for so many, and that is the word loss. Those who were bereaved lost the most. Now, the focus on the inquiry is going to focus on 8 things. It's going to focus on the public health system, its care homes, the effect of lockdowns, schooling of children, minorities, mental health, the economy and border controls. You know, so there's so much to focus on that the families are wanting to come and give their piece because they're saying they're liking it to the inquiry of the Grenfell Tower and the Manchester Arena bombing. But the bare reality is there was 204,776 people that died through the COVID or have got COVID on their death certificate. That is way more than the tragedy of Grenfell and the tragedy of the Manchester Arena. And that is the difficult human side of the ruling, of the law, that Heather Hallett will need to focus on, and that's what she wants to focus on. She's not saying we don't want to hear from you, because clearly they do, but that is not the focus of the inquiry.
But she may envy Liz Truss for getting such a good press by the end of all this.
Well, yes.
Yeah, says it all.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, thanks both for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it.
You might want to stay tuned, actually, for the next bit. We're going to be checking in with Eamonn Holmes. But in the meantime, let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines, just approaching 8:45.
Train passengers are set for more travel chaos today as yet another strike starts. Members of the union ASLEF and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chail will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act.
Elon Musk has offered to buy Twitter for a second time. The social media giant confirmed it plans to accept a deal worth £38.3 billion. The SpaceX founder originally pulled out of the purchase in July, citing the number of fake or spam accounts on the platform.
Now, as you know, I'm not normally joined by Paul Hawkins in the morning. It's usually my lovely co-presenter, Eamonn Holmes. But last week, he decided to undergo back surgery, and I'm pleased to say he joins us from the comfort of his home this morning. Hello, my long-lost friend. How are you?
Thank you. This time last week, I was lying on a slab
in a hospital being operated on. So I'm 1 week on from the operation. And I have to say, rumours of my death have been hugely exaggerated, as Mark Twain would say. So I'm 1 week on. It's early days. And, it'll probably be about 3 weeks, Isabel, before they will know if it's been a success or not.
Well, talking of grossly exaggerated, I've just been reading on your Instagram. You say how my lovely friend and presenting partner, Isabel, convinced me to go under the knife after this picture was taken. You're blaming me for this.
No, that means that your actions convinced me as opposed to you talking me into it. But you, my lovely friend, after doing a week's broadcasting on the Queen's funeral, and you're so professional and fantastic, and what people won't know is where we were sitting was a bit of an assault course to actually, when you do these broadcasts, you've got to climb over scaffolding, and a bit like, it was, what it was like. I'm trying to describe it to people. They see the lovely view, but to get to the view takes a lot, and it took a lot out of me, I have to say. And then there was us on the last day. And throughout the week, we've a wonderful producer, a little pocket rocket called Sarah Walken. And and she was brilliant. And she's half my size and height. And she was my crutch, literally. There she is there. She was my crutch. And it was quite embarrassing. But then on the last day, my lovely dear friend, Isabel, had to walk me a fair distance, Isabel. It was a fair distance.
Well, it was a fair distance, but we were up against the crowds. That was the thing. There was a pack of sort of 8 people wide, all walking to try and see the royal procession, and we were going against the crowd, arm in arm, and it was a long walk.
See, the thing is, why I want to do this interview is it could be misconstrued that this was a romantic liaison. You were literally wrapped around me. And me, you. So, but I want to say, and you're one of my dearest friends in life. But you go above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, there is such a beautiful heart with you, and it was humiliating for me. You took me through that crowd forever and ever and ever and ever, and I stumbled a few times, and my leg gave way a few times, and after that, I was very humiliated, really, and I was humbled. But I mean, you didn't make any issue of it, but it was an issue for me. So what I did was somebody was speaking to me, and prior to then, I've been living with this injury for 18 months, and 4 times surgeons have said to me, "No, there's a 20% risk of this going wrong. We're not going to do it. Let it heal itself." But it wasn't healing itself, and I found a surgeon who felt with neurosurgery he could make a pretty good attempt on this, and he did. That's not the surgeon, that's me. That's me out and about. But everywhere you go, that was in Cheltenham Races, everywhere I go, I've got these crutches, and it just got to the stage, Isabel, where I thought, I want my life back. I want my life back, and actually talking to you today. So that's where you convinced me. You convinced me that day. I've got to try something. I mean, if it works, it works. If it didn't work, it didn't work. So nothing ventured, nothing gained. But this isn't so much about me. This is about people who have lower back injuries and who have chronic pain. I lived with 18 months with chronic pain. I still have got chronic pain. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully this will cure it. And the discs on my back, people keep thinking this is about my hips. It's not about my hips. It's about disc degeneration in my lower back and impeding on my sciatic nerve and first of all, my right leg, then my left leg. And the surgery hopefully will put this right. Yeah. But there are so many people, Isabel, who suffer from this, and they have to suffer in silence. And do you know where I get angry about this? About furniture designers and car designers and people who, because I'll tell you, when your back goes, you don't appreciate it till it's gone. And then every chair is a hurdle. Every sofa is impossible to get out of. If your bottom is lower than your knees, you are in trouble because you can't raise yourself from that seat. And that is debilitating, and it's humiliating as well. And I think you can be stylish and still practical, really, in terms of furniture. And I think if I was a politician, that's the sort of thing I'd legislate for. because they must, furniture must cause so many back problems. So if you say to me, how did this, I know your next question was probably going to be, Eamonn, how did it happen? But the thing is, I don't know. The thing is, I don't know. I don't know if it was getting out of bed. The thing is, was it getting out of a car? But it happened.
Yeah.
And age plays a part as well. But when it hits, you don't want it. You don't want it.
But Eamonn, anyone who watches the programme regularly will know you well, will know your personality. Anyone who works with you, you're a fantastic broadcaster, the famous Irish broadcaster, no less. But you're not a patient man. And when I called you this week to say, how are you doing? You said, well, I'm not cured. And I think you thought you were going to wake up from the operating table and be dancing on Strictly Come Dancing. You're going to have to wait the course with the recovery. I know you're desperate to get back on the screens on Monday, and we fingers crossed, we'll see. But you're going to have to be patient, and you're going to have to put in the time.
Yeah, I suppose so. And what I've got to realise, that anyone who goes through an operation like this is, it's the inflammation in your nerves, and your nerves are agitated, and there's inflammation in your body. So the pain stays. The surgeon hopefully will have cured the cause of the pain, at least in one leg. Now, I think there may be another operation to have. But why I wanted to come on the show today, because otherwise you're just a victim of clickbait and, all sorts of stupid stories in magazines and newspapers and things. But, this is the situation. You've got to be sort of realistic about it. And I have to say, I'm by no means finished. And by no means, I've got an appetite for my work. I've got, I want to do things. I love working with you in the morning. And it's just those big stools that we have to climb onto.
Wriggling around on them all morning. But there have been so many messages, Eamonn. We've got 3 minutes left, but I could just read emails all morning. Jane's been in touch, Jackie's been in touch, Roger's been in touch.
He doesn't listen. I hope you're not going to drop me for the Foreign Secretary. I hope you're not going to cut me short.
We wouldn't dream of that. We will keep James cleverly waiting for you.
I'm waiting. Yeah.
He's not there yet, don't worry. Wendy, Rachel, all of them sending their best wishes. The newsroom also incredibly concerned. And Clem Muldoon and David Mellor in the studio with us this morning.
And me, Eamonn.
And Paul, all here, watching, listening to this, all wanting to say, I know, Claire, you're itching to send your love to him.
I am. And I just want to say, Eamonn, if there's any more funny things I can get, I'll WhatsApp them to you, as I do. And I just want to say really good luck. And you might be having a pain in your back, my love, but I'm sure Ruth has got a pain in her neck, and that might be you.
I love her neck. Actually, I think I'm more than a pain in her neck, but anyway, yeah.
Wonderful that you came through
my entertainment secretary. Yes, Mr. Mellor, lovely to see you.
Yeah, and wonderful that you came through it, because it's a brave decision to have a back operation, so well done you. So you now go from a sad victim of back pain to be the world's worst patient.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, an impatient patient, but there's a lot of physio to do. There's lots of things to do. But listen, I hope, I'll be very much on the mend. And as I say, the country, what was sad was when I went on social media to talk about this, under the hashtag of chronic pain, there's just so many people. I have at least hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's the people who don't have hope, the people who have got pain and they know that it's not going to go away. So there's something, I think, in terms of the country, and if you are suffering from chronic pain, my sympathy to you. The thing is about me, you see me there every morning where Paul is, and I'm so happy and smiley. No one would ever have an idea. I work with Isabel. She's constantly laughing. She never sees me in any grumpy form whatsoever. So I'm just a joy. I'm a joy, despite my pain. Joy.
You are a joy. None of that is not true. It's a fact. And another fact, Eamonn, is that the Foreign Secretary is now ready. So we're going to say goodbye from one VIP and introduce another. It's been lovely to see you. Get well soon.
Good to see you, Eamonn. You're ditching me for James cleverly, right? Okay. Well, look, the idea is hopefully I'll see you guys soon, next Monday. That's the plan. If I don't materialise, you'll know it's all gone horribly wrong. But for the moment, thank you very much. Thank you.
We miss you. Lots of love. Look after yourself and be nice to Ruthie. See you Monday.
Good to see you, Eamonn. Take care, mate.
Bye. Oh, there we go. Did you see him rolling his eyes at the end?
Yeah.
Can't
we wish him well in his recovery. Good to see Eamonn there. It's 8:55. Let's go live to Birmingham there to the Conservative Party conference. Speak to the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, who's been standing by, being very patient for us. Appreciate your time this morning, Foreign Secretary. First, if we could just start by sort of recapping for our viewers where we are at the moment with regards to discipline and unity within the Cabinet. Now, we had the Home Secretary and the Levelling Up Secretary yesterday saying they were disappointed with the U-turn on the 45p rate of tax. We had the Leader of the House of Commons as well, Penny Mordaunt, saying that she felt the benefits should be uprated in line with inflation. This is open dissent within the Cabinet. And on top of that, the former Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, saying that there was only 10 days left to save Liz Truss's premiership. And Robert Halfon, I heard on the radio last night, sounding really despondent, saying that people were walking around the conference yesterday feeling like zombies. It sounds like it's been a terrible conference, and Liz Truss has lost the authority of the party.
Well, look, what I can see, but you can't because it's behind the camera, is the queue of people who are already queuing up to go and see the Prime Minister's speech. Look, I'm an old-fashioned guy. I always think that the best way for ministers to feed their ideas and views into government is through the traditional structures, around the cabinet table or in cabinet committees, because we're in a privileged position where we have access to the Chancellor, access to the Prime Minister. Backbenchers, I appreciate, will want to say things at fringe meetings. They'll want to express their views in other way. But what I have seen whenever the Prime Minister comes to an event here at conference, huge reception, really passionate and positive reception, because people can see she is getting on with the things that she said she was going to get on with. Cutting taxes for 30 million people, investing in the UK, supporting people who are concerned about those energy price rises. So that's what the Prime Minister is focused on. The party, I think, is responding well to that as a whole, and there will always be some people that are critical, but that's politics.
Yeah, so has she spoken to the Cabinet jointly? Has there been an edict issued that, look, I need to maintain party discipline here. If you've got a problem, come and see me, you know, off camera, off microphone, and we can have a chat about it, but please don't publicly challenge my authority. Has she said that to the Cabinet?
No, so I've not seen any messages like that at all. I think people instinctively know that the British people want to see us focused on them. They want to see us discussing how to get wage growth in the UK economy, invest in the parts of the country where they live. That's what they want us to do. I think that's what we should be focused on. I know that's what the Prime Minister is focused on, and I think you'll hear that in the speech that she's going to give a little bit later on today.
Well, rather than guessing what the public wants to hear, a word cloud's been conducted by jail partners who are pollsters. Words like incompetent, useless and untrustworthy have all been associated with the Prime Minister. And to hear you say no edict has been handed out to a Cabinet who are openly criticising one another, making policy on the hoof, surprises me at a stage when her personal authority is being questioned.
Well, the Prime Minister, when she was running for leadership, set out the agenda for government. She said she wanted to cut the taxes of hard-working families across the country. She said she wanted to go for a pro-growth agenda. She said she wanted to speed up the delivery of infrastructure which unlocks the potential of every part of the UK. That's what she said she was going to do. That is what she is doing in government, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to rally around her, because that is the right agenda for government. That's what's going to support the British people. That is what's going to make sure that we are successful in the future and at the next general election, and that, as I say, you know, having these kind of side conversations isn't useful, and it doesn't really serve the British people.
Yeah, two things. First of all, can you just clear up for us? Is November the 23rd still the date for the publication of the medium-term fiscal plan, or are we going to get a new date soon? Because there was a little bit of confusion about that yesterday. And secondly, would you like to see, and I know that there are lots of people in your Braintree constituency who will want this, to see benefits for working people uprated in line with inflation?
Well, look, I can't confirm exactly what the date is. The Chancellor will do so, but the process, and kind of to answer the second bit of your question, is the process for calculating the balance between money coming in and money coming out, about tax and about expenditure, whether through benefits or other things, will be done by the Chancellor in the usual way. The announcements will be made later on this year for implementation early part of next year. That's the usual process. And as I said, for me, feeding in ideas, feeding in what my constituents are saying to me to help the Chancellor and the Treasury team with their decision making, that I will do in the usual way, directly with him, rather than through your programme. And I hope you forgive me for sticking to that tradition.
Oh, I do find it hard, though, for a member of the Cabinet to not be able to clarify when we're talking about the importance of certainty, not least from the market perspective, that you can't tell us or rule out whether or not this fiscal plan for the medium term will be on the 23rd of November or not. We were told it would be this month. Then the Chancellor threw that into question again yesterday during an interview on GB News. That was rowed back on later by his special advisers. We're no further along the road, and we've got the front of the Daily Star. Kwasi, it's all the Queen's fault. He's blaming the mini-budget disarray on the period of mourning following the death of the Queen. There's chaos. What's going on?
So the date of the announcement is far less important than the date of implementation. So the announcement of what changes...
The reason I want to push you on this is because the suggestion was it was going to be before the Monetary Policy Committee meeting on the 3rd of November. And that's absolutely essential because the OBR report would come out at the same time and would then influence whether or not interest rates would go up, which has an impact on mortgages as well. So it is important, and it's not just an arbitrary date that can be set ad hoc when the Chancellor finally decides. People are waiting literally day in, day out, whether or not they can renew their mortgage, to find out what's going on.
Well, look, we absolutely recognise that uncertainty has a negative effect. Of course we understand that. We also want to make sure that the decisions that we make as a government and the Chancellor and the Treasury team make as a unit are based on the most up-to-date information, are based on all the relevant facts, are decisions that are in the best interests of the British people. That is what they are looking to do. As I say, they will give clarity as to when announcements are going to be made. But as I say, they'll be made this autumn for implementation in the spring, which is the usual rhythm for these kind of fiscal events.
Just a quick word on Ukraine, if you will, Foreign Secretary. How worried are you about the prospect of Vladimir Putin using tactical nuclear weapons? There were reports about this train possibly maybe carrying weapons. Can you clear that up for us?
Well, I'm not comfortable speculating on those kind of reports or intelligence matters on the programme. Of course, we listen very carefully to what Vladimir Putin says, but we also recognise he has a history of saber rattling, of using this kind of intimidating language. But what he should recognise is what I said in my speech, what the Prime Minister has said, and what I suspect she'll say again today, is our support for Ukraine is enduring because the stakes are incredibly high. This is not just about defending Ukraine, this is about defending freedom. And we have got to send a very clear message around the world that the UK, in defence of freedom, will stick with it, that we will have that strategic endurance to stand by our partners and our friends when they defend themselves against this aggression.
And just very quickly, I know you've got to go and your team are keen for this to wrap up, but I just want to ask, how helpful are the interventions of people like Elon Musk suggesting that Crimea should just be handed to Russia in the name of peace?
Well, look, there were voices when Russia annexed Crimea. There were voices that were saying, well, all he wants is Crimea. Actually, we think Crimea is actually part of Russia. He'll go that far and then no further. What we have seen is that he has lied and lied and lied, because it didn't just stop at Crimea. Then he went into Luhansk. Then he went into Donetsk. Then he invaded a number of parts of Ukraine. He won't stop until he is stopped. That's why our support has to endure. That's why we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians. And you can't demand that a country gives away massive chunks of its territory for what we know will not stop his aggression and ambition.
OK, Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
5 minutes past 9. Let's get a reaction from the Research Director of Public Affairs at Ipsos Mori, Kieran Pedley. Kieran, morning to you. Just give us a quick update on how the polls are looking. Any improvement for the Conservative Party?
No, I don't think so. I think what we've seen since Liz Truss has taken over as Prime Minister is almost the reverse of a honeymoon period. For reasons that I think your viewers will sort of know. The recent economic announcements have not gone down well. Right now we see 80% of the country think that the British economy is in a poor state, and 6 in 10 think that the Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has made that worse. And I think what this means in the round in total is that 2/3 of the public tell us that they do not have confidence in the Conservatives' long-term economic plan. So when you take all of that together, it's been a very challenging, to put it politely, start for Liz Truss and her government. And we've seen in voting intention polls subsequently large leads for the Labour Party. Of course, we don't know if these things are permanent. We'll have to wait and see on that score. But certainly these are very large leads for Labour at the moment, and a very difficult time for the Conservatives, which I think we've seen this week.
When it comes to polls, how easy is it to make big differences in them? We saw them obviously rising rapidly for Labour in the wake of the mini-budget last week, but how quickly could it go back, do you think? Or once you've got this kind of landslide territory, is it very difficult, do you think, politically, or is there no examples really that
Well, I think that the scale of lead that we're seeing for Labour at the moment, 25, 30 points in some cases, is the type of lead we've not really seen since before Tony Blair won in 1997. These are huge leads. We're not just talking about a small lead that maybe can get reversed in a matter of months. I think the key point here is that we've got a new government and a new Prime Minister, and this is the first that the public are seeing of them, and they're forming their judgments sort of as we speak. So this isn't a case of, say, Boris Johnson's been in power a few years, he's behind in the polls, but maybe he can reverse. This is the first experience people have of Liz Truss and her government. And I think the risk for her and for the Conservatives at the moment is that this is how they are defined in the public's minds. And you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, as the saying goes. And so that's the real concern for her, is that people will make up their minds and there's no way back. Now, you never say never in politics, but we'll have to wait and see. But it's not been good.
Yeah. Is there no such thing as second impressions then?
Well, there can be. I mean, look, one thing we've seen over the last few years is that unexpected events have happened. I mean, Lord knows we've seen that with the global pandemic and war in Ukraine and all these other things. So I think ultimately Liz Truss has set her stall out on the economy, and should it improve in the future, then perhaps she will get the credit for that. The concern that she will have and the Conservatives will have is that people tune out. They just decide that the Conservatives are finished, that there needs to be a change, and that almost doesn't matter then what happens next. I mean, if we think to the back end of Gordon Brown's premiership, he won some plaudits for how he handled the financial crash, but almost by that point, people had decided it was time for a change, and they decided to move on.
What about Kwasi Kwarteng in all of this? Because it seems to me that if there needs to be a fresh start, if you like, for this administration, even though it's in its early days, it has to be one of the two, and presumably the preferable option of the two to go would be the Chancellor, because we wouldn't have all the disruption of going for a new leader. I mean, what do the public think of Kwasi Kwarteng? You've been polling their views on what he's done to the economy, for example.
Well, as I say, 6 in 10 think he's made the economy worse since he became Chancellor, and so that clearly sort of tells you what you need to know about the public's sort of perceptions of him. I suppose the challenge is, to what extent is he seen as one and the same as Liz Truss? To what extent are they seen as if Kwasi Kwarteng is to go, does that make the government look like it's in disarray and only further entrench views of Liz Truss and her competence? I mean, I can't comment on whether he should go or not. That's obviously a matter for government and his future. But certainly, it's not been a good start for him.
Yeah, these enormous leads for Labour, is that because Conservative voters are switching to Labour, or simply less people are willing to vote Conservative, which gives Labour that big lead?
I think it's a combination of the two. We are seeing sort of double digits now, switchers from 2019 Conservatives to the Labour Party. So anywhere to around 15% or so of people that voted Conservative in 2019 now saying they'll vote Labour. There's a lot of 2019 Conservatives saying that they'll vote for other parties, or even just sit on their hands and not vote at all. I mean, it all nets out at the same thing, which is ultimately strong Labour leads. I think what we're also starting to see is people take the Labour Party a bit more seriously. I would say, like, in the last couple of years, you've seen that in some cases, Labour's lead has been as much about Conservative weakness as Labour's strength. But what we're now starting to see is people take Keir Starmer more seriously as a potential Prime Minister. Our polling in September showed that 51% thought it was likely he would be Prime Minister in the future. 35% said it would be unlikely. Back in January of this year, those numbers were almost reversed and the public didn't expect him to be in number 10. And that's important because it frames how people see politics moving forward. If they see it as inevitable almost that Keir Starmer enters number 10 and that Labour is a party of government, A, they take Labour more seriously in its policy announcements, but B, they start to sort of almost look over the Conservatives to what's coming next.
And just very quickly, anyone who says, polls, they don't mean anything anyway, they get them wrong most of the time. What would you say to that?
Well, we certainly don't get them wrong most of the time. In 2019, we were spot on at Ipsos. Not complacent about that, of course. We're always evaluating your methods. Look, polls can change.
As in the Boris versus Jeremy Corbyn?
Yes, exactly.
That was fairly obvious, wasn't it, that Boris was going to win that? I mean, it seemed at the time anyway, but it was the Brexit vote where the pollsters really sort of let everybody down.
No, but there's a separate conversation there. I don't think that's quite true. When you look at the polls there, they were quite close, and I think that was as much a failure of punditry as polling. But in 2019, there's one thing to say who will win. There's another thing to get the actual vote shares completely right, which is what we did. But just briefly on the polls now, it's certainly true that polling can change. What the polling picture looks like today might be different sort of months or, a couple of years from now. It's up to the government to recover its reputation. What goes down can come up and vice versa. But I would stress that leads for Labour of 25 to 30 points are somewhat unprecedented in modern times, so it's an awful long way back for the Conservatives.
Interesting. Always fascinating to talk to you. Kieran Pedley, thank you very much indeed from Ipsos Mori.
It is 12 minutes past 9. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening on GB News Breakfast this morning. Elon Musk, as we've been mentioning, has asked Twitter users to weigh in on a plan to end Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, he suggested that Crimea, which Moscow seized in 2014, be formally recognised as Russia and Ukraine remain neutral. He asked Twitter users to vote yes or no on the plan.
Well, the Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharenko thinks Musk should focus on business instead of the war.
Only about territories, it's about our people. And Russia is committing genocide on occupied territories. How can we say, seriously, let's leave people under genocide, let Russians kill them and rape them? I can't understand. So I think it's better for Elon to make business and not to make geopolitical propositions like this.
Train passengers are set for more travel chaos today as yet another strike starts. Members of the union ASLEV and the Transport Salaried Staffs Association are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions.
A man accused of trying to harm the late Queen after being caught with a loaded crossbow at Windsor Castle last Christmas will enter pleas later. 20-year-old Jaswant Singh Chail will appear at the Old Bailey to face 3 charges, including an offence under the Treason Act. Let's look ahead to the World Cup in Qatar then. Less than 50 days away and will be watched by millions across the nation, billions across the world. Former 1966 World Cup winner Sir Geoff Hurst plans to bring some joy for older football fans because he's launching a competition for fans over 66 to win free food and drink during the tournament. We can speak to Sir Geoff Hurst live now. Sir Geoff, really good to speak to you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Just first of all, how much are you looking forward to the World Cup in Qatar?
I am. It's every 4 years. It's a fantastic competition. And you've talked about what we're doing as a competition. This is a Green King competition. And what's interesting, it's for people of 66. So those people will be about 10 years of age at the World Cup at a time when they would remember it. If you go back before that, kids of 5 or 6, 7 may not remember those events or the World Cup. So I think the timing of the 10-year-olds then and 66 now, the competition goes to the end of this month, free food and drink for this Green King. I've got about 900 pubs, so it's going to be a fantastic promotion. I'm actually delighted with it, particularly the age, the 66 years of age. And 66 people will actually win the free food and drink during the World Cup. Nice picture there that's one of my favourite pictures on screen of us in our tracksuits. Very nice.
Yeah. I love seeing those pictures. So just to clarify, with this competition, it's for people who are 10 years old, give or take in 66, and it's their memories of how they experienced the World Cup that year.
Yes, I mean, and those memories of 10-year-olds will be fantastic. And people I still talk to today around the 66, 70 years of age who remember when they were 10, they remember the World Cup. And very, very importantly and significantly, they remember where they were and what they were doing on the day. And so the stories never end when you're successful in the World Cup in your own competition. So this promotion, I'm just delighted to be involved with. Because it's people in my age bracket, of course.
Yeah, well, yeah, and people in my age bracket love hearing, and even younger than me, love hearing about it. But do you ever get, I mean, we talk about 66 and we've gone on about it because it was a seminal moment for English sport, an incredible time, but do you ever get tired of talking about it constantly? Would you like to see England lift the World Cup in Qatar and then we can start talking about something else?
No, I don't get fed up talking about it. And yes, I'd love to see the team win it again. It's been long overdue. I would easily say I've had a perfect run, really, for 56 years. So our time has gone, and ideally love us to win it today. It would be fantastic. But you never thought that for 56 years we would not have won it again. So let's hope we can do it. I think we've got a good bunch of young players, and I'm very hopeful going into the World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah, are you worried about the poor run of form leading into the tournament? England have suffered a lot of defeats.
Yeah, I think we're all a little bit concerned. I think our team were unbeaten prior to a World Cup a year before when we won it. But having said that, the last game, coming back from 2-0 down to be leading 3-2, then the keeper making a mistake to make it 3-3, really, I think it was a nice little last game prior to the World Cup. But the results beforehand, in one sense, don't matter because it's not the competition. The results matter when the tournament turns up in November. And I'm probably more confident than I've been for some time. Let's be fair, under Gareth Southgate, it's been terrific. The semi-final of the World Cup, the final of the Euros, and prior to that, it's been pretty awful. Let's be quite frank about it. Iceland beating us. That's Iceland, the country, not the fast food store. My wife said to me she never saw me screaming at the television as much as she did during watching that game against Iceland. And prior to that in Brazil, two qualifying games and out of the 3 we should have played. So it's been really. So I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of being critical of Gareth Southgate. He's done a fantastic job. Well, let's talk about how well we're going to do in Qatar.
Yeah, listen, Sir Jeff, it's been really good to sort of reminisce about the 60s with you. Just before I let you go, I'm going to put you on the spot slightly here, but we're going to be talking about James Bond because it's 60 years to the day since Dr. No was released in 62. I was just wondering.
Great film. I watched the film. I watched it. My first Bond film. Fantastic. Ursula Andress walking off the beach in that costume with a dagger tucked in a bathing costume, or however it was.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And the rest of the film as well. Listen, Sir Jeff, good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
That's a pleasure.
Sir Jeff Hurst there. Coming up then, it is Bond, James Bond Day. Do you see what they've done there?
Yes, I do see what they did there. And it was an iconic moment, wasn't it, with Ursula Andress coming out of the ocean. We all wanted to be Ursula Andress.
Did we?
We did, well,
we're joined,
us girls.
We're going to be joined by 007 expert AJ Chowdhury after this.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, he's the British government agent with a licence to kill, and 60 years ago, Dr. No, the best film in the James Bond series, was released in cinemas.
You think it's the best one?
No, I don't. I was just reading the link. Why did I say the best? I think
you
it's
said
supposed
the
to be
best,
the first.
but then I thought you were interesting. Writer AJ Chowdhury, he's known to have a bit of a thing about 007 after co-writing the book Some Kind of Hero, the remarkable story of the James Bond films, and he joins us now. Morning to you, AJ.
Good morning.
First of all,
it's a great morning. Sorry.
Yeah, morning.
It's all right, we're all confused.
60 years since the release of Dr. No. This is the longest-running film franchise in history. There's a doc out about it. Lots of celebration about the franchise itself. And essentially, every film, more or less, has been roughly the same character, the same kind of plot. There's a baddie. They've normally got a pet that they stroke. They're trying to.
Ladies.
They're trying to. It's the same for, but it keeps going. Why?
Why are we talking about global James Bond today? Well, I've just come back from the Albert Hall yesterday, where they had a wonderful concert celebrating the sound of 007 for charity. Dame Shirley Bassey was there, and all of the world descended on London yesterday from all quarters, all continents, to celebrate this British icon. Bond at his best is British, and he represents his country rather like the late Queen. And it's a kind of constant in all our lives. It's kind of populist entertainment, sure, but it's also a cultural time capsule. It celebrates the zeitgeist, the music of Bond, the sound of 007. Matt Whitecross's splendid documentary launches today. Apart from the great music, it kind of shows how we evolve with time, what the fashions are, in a sort of smallish sense of way. We must never forget that the films are based on the novels by Ian Fleming, those 12 novels and 9 short stories written from 1952 to 1964. They're the basis, they're the literary basis on which the films are based. And the latest in that kind of series, Kim Sherwood, kind of exemplifies what's happened to the world of Bond. Kim Sherwood has written a book called Double or Nothing about kind of the absence of James Bond in 2022, and it sort of captures all the zeitgeistian sort of characters we have today. And Daniel Craig's Bond, he's the most critically and commercially successful actor to ever play James Bond, and I think he's brought it right up to date. He's taken the spirit and essence of those Ian Fleming novels and made it very, very much of our times. Bond is way beyond just a series of films, and it's way beyond more than the cultural box office gross. It's about the culture that's moved forward. We all quote Bond lines, we all quote Bond characters, we all quote Bond memes. Bond is really part of not just the British way of life, and I think that's what makes Bond special. That's why we always come back to see where they're going to go with it, locations wise, the casting of the leading ladies, the villains, all these things matter. Who sings the title song? So it's almost like a global sort of pantomime. We know what to expect, sure. It's familiar, sure, but they've got to innovate and take us in new directions. And the last few Bond films have won Oscars and really taken the global audience by storm.
Yeah, and to be fair, as you say, Daniel Craig has updated the character and they've given it more depth, more emotion.
Wasn't the one
in terms of looking ahead to where it goes. If they're going to update the character completely, do you think there's going to be spending cuts at MI6 and maybe you'll be taking the bus?
Stop it. No.
Well, you know, the thing about James Bond, he's had spending cuts and he had spending sort of flourishes. I think one director said he could make a film on the telephone budget of a Bond film. So, yeah, no, I think the future is bright. Amazon Studios, Jeff Bezos has bought over the studios that co-owns Bond. And I think as we speak, Bond is in ruder health, critically and commercially, than he's ever been before.
Okay.
The fact
AJ,
that we're all talking about it.
We've got 10 seconds, but only time really for you to say a name. Who would you like to see cast as the next James Bond?
Nicholas Hoult, an actor who's sort of British, who's up and coming, who's in their early 30s, who will stand 10 films. Bond is like a brand. You don't turn a Coke can blue. And I think
he was in Skins, and was he the kid in that movie with Hugh Grant?
About a Boy, yeah.
About
He's
a
one
Boy.
Of maybe 5 or 6.
Good tip. AJ Chowdhury, really lovely to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Nicholas Hoult, you heard it here first.
There you go, Nicholas Hoult. I'd never heard of him, so
Well,
but
now
I do
you
know
know,
the
now
face,
you know.
like you said, yeah.
Right, we have to go. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll be back bright and early from 6 o'clock tomorrow.
Good morning. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A windy Wednesday and a wet start for many. Pretty mild out there this morning as well. Later on, we should see some brighter skies developing. But generally, it's a wet and windy start from this area of low pressure. It's been intensifying overnight, now crossing away from Scotland up towards the northern parts of the North Sea. But it's left behind a lot of wet weather this morning, a lot of spray and surface water on the roads, parts of the M6, the M8 in particular, but that rain is slipping south down across the Midlands now. After a dry start across eastern England, the rain will push in across Lincolnshire by lunchtime and then towards East Anglia and the southeast this afternoon. It will be clearing away from the south and from the northeast. Sunshine will follow, along with a whole raft of showers. It is blustery. It's quite mild out there this morning. Temperatures actually likely to be a bit lower this afternoon compared to this morning, generally in the mid-teens for England and Wales. 11 or 12 across Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it'll feel colder because of the wind. A very blustery day then, staying pretty gusty overnight tonight. That rain will clear by late afternoon across East Anglia and the southeast, and then clear spells for most of England and Wales, but a lot of showers will keep coming in across Scotland and Northern Ireland. It will be a cooler night, certainly across the south. Temperatures down into single figures, staying at 9 or 10 across towns and cities further north, where there will still be a pretty strong wind blowing. A blustery day then on Thursday, not as windy as today, but some good spells of sunshine to come tomorrow for most of southern England, the Midlands, eastern England and much of eastern Scotland. The day's going to be dry and bright, but further west there will be a lot of showers coming in, parts of Wales, especially Northern Ireland and western Scotland. Still breezy, as I said, so again feeling cooler than these temperatures would suggest, but generally a little bit milder on Thursday compared to today, and staying gusty with further wet weather slipping south on Friday.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, live from the Conservative Party conference here in Birmingham. We've got a stellar show for you today, exploring all of the ins and outs of Conservative Party conference, the ups and downs, and what is to come for this party at a turbulent time in British politics. We've got some stellar guests for you as well, all to come after the headlines, so we'll catch you